Chapter 695. Dinner was served by the servant. Before she even opened the lid, Annie could already smell the mouth-watering aroma. Inside the metal box was a thick stack of bread that had been baked to a golden color. It was obvious that it was made from peeled wheat flour that had been kneaded and fermented. In addition, there was a small bag of butter and a pot of broth, enough for 5 people to enjoy. The spoons and dishes are in the wooden cabinet in the cupboard. Breakfast will be delivered tomorrow, so you don't have to keep food overnight, the servant said methodically. Please don't leave the Foreign Affairs building before you get an official resident ID card. In addition, the basement is forbidden. If you want to practice your ability, you can go to the rooftop. There's a service room on the first floor. I'll sleep there. If you need anything, please come to me at any time. Unlike the hotel, all services here are free. The 5 people were stunned and did not come to themselves for a while until the servant bowed and left. Is this how great nobles entertain people? It's exactly the same as in a play. Amy was the first to exclaim. But the lines are wrong. For example, Broken Sword and Hero asked curiously, like, Your Excellency, I'm honored to serve you, and so on. They usually start like this. We're not nobles. Of course, he won't say that. Number 76 chuckled. Anyway, let's eat first. I'm starving. You're right. Everyone swallowed their saliva. Oh no, is this the honey attack of the King of Grey Castle? Annie was worried. It seemed to be a move to rope them in, but the person in charge of the Witch Union did not even ask about their abilities. This contradictory move made it difficult for her to judge the other party's intention. It would be fine if she was alone, but now she had 4 companions. She had to be more cautious and could not make the same mistakes as before. There was no doubt that the safest way was to stay away from the western region. The church had been destroyed and the biggest enemy was gone. As long as they could find a village or a small town near a big city, they could hide their identities and live, just like in the Kingdom of Dawn. Unfortunately, this method did not work now. Watching number 76 stagger to the table, Annie could not help sighing. In any case, the Witch Union did have the ability to heal the disabled, and the prospects described were quite tempting. Now that she had seen the light of hope for the hero to stand up again, she naturally couldn't just leave with the 4 of them. Forget it, I'll fill my stomach first. When Annie put a piece of buttered bread into her mouth, she immediately felt an unprecedented soft and fragrant sweetness fill her mouth. The bread was so smooth that there was not a single grain of grit in it. It flowed easily into her throat without much chewing. Damn it, this honey's attack is a little too fierce. Although she was thinking this, she found that her hand had already uncontrollably moved to the next piece. For a moment, apart from the sounds of eating and drinking, no one spoke in the room. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when there were only a few scraps left in the metal box. Will we still be able to eat this kind of food in the future? Broken Sword reluctantly sucked every finger. I don't think that's possible. Amy picked up the soup pot and poured the fragrant broth evenly into 5 bowls. There were still some green onions and circles of oil floating on the golden broth, making it look particularly tempting. This kind of bread should be something that only upper-class nobles can afford to eat. My father only eats coarse bread the most. It's already very good to have coarse bread to eat. Don't forget that when we first arrived in the Kingdom of Dawn, it was difficult to fill our stomachs. Hero blew at the hot air, impatiently took a long sip, and then exhaled a breath of warm air from her mouth. Her low voice was full of long-lost satisfaction. Lady Vendy said that there are many benefits to joining the Witch Union. I wonder if it includes food? Before she left, she said that she would take us to visit Neverwinter and the Witch Union tomorrow. Let's ask her then. I hope so. Listening to her companions talking about the possible benefits of the Witch Union, Annie had a faint premonition that they might stay in this city for a long time. After taking a bath, they climbed into bed early. The house consisted of a living room and 4 bedrooms. The 5 witches discussed and quickly decided on who to sleep in. As the strongest witch, Annie naturally chose to sleep in the same bed with Hero, whose life was extremely inconvenient. The bed was very soft and did not have a musty smell. Obviously, it was often cleaned here. There were only a few small flames left in the fireplace. The flickering dim light reflected the furnishings in the room on the white stone walls. The black shadows swayed gently as if dancing with the howling cold wind outside the window. She carried Hero to bed and then blew out the candles. Hero squeezed into her arms and said softly, "It's been almost a year since we left the kingdom of Wolfheart, right? If you count from the day we arrived at the border of the Kingdom of Dawn, it's nearly a year and 2 months." Annie nodded. "How long has it been since we left our hometown?" This question made her fall into silence. In fact, Annie could not remember the specific time when she left her hometown. She only remembered that it was a remote village in the northwest of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. After her identity as a witch was exposed, she kept trekking eastward and covered more than half of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. It was not until she was betrayed by the Bloodfang Association that she stopped in the suburbs of King City. It was the same for Broken Sword and Hero. They were forced to leave home for their own reasons and went through many hardships along the way. Finally, they met Annie in the Kingdom of Wolfheart and escaped together. "It's been almost 5 years, Hero said in a low voice. "During these 5 years, I've been hiding from the church and haven't stopped for even a moment. When I was in King City, I thought I finally didn't have to run anymore. I didn't expect that I would still have to run even if I lost my legs." Annie could not help hugging her a little tighter. Lady Vendy said, "This is the home of witches. Can we really settle down here?" Hero's voice was intermittent, like the faint sound of the wind outside the window. She seemed to be asking Annie, but also seemed to be talking to herself. "I don't want to wander around anymore." Annie suddenly felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Don't worry. We'll have a house of our own. You'll also get your legs back. You can go anywhere you want, not to run away but to travel leisurely." "Is that so?" Hero paused for a long time. "If only I had been born in Grey Castle from the beginning." In the end, her voice was so soft that it could not be heard. When Annie opened her mouth and was about to say something, she heard the sound of even breathing. Chapter 696. After Roland fell asleep, Nightingale slipped into the mist and quietly left the castle. Her destination was the Foreign Affairs building. The dark ground shrouded in the night showed distinct black and white colors in the misty world. Using the twisted contour lines, she leaped several meters and crossed the garden wall in a few steps. Roland called this method of movement flash, and said it was a magic skill with no cooldown time. Nightingale immediately fell in love with this name, moving like lightning, quiet like a shadow, suddenly appearing and disappearing, impossible to guard against. This was called the flash. However, she did not quite understand what the latter part of the phrase, cooldown time, meant. But this was also an old habit of His Majesty. After staying with him for a long time, she would always hear some incomprehensible words. After leaving the castle district, Nightingale did not go down the slope as usual. Instead, she directly leaped from the hillside and walked in the air along the lines that appeared in the sky. After a few steps, she directly landed on the top floor of the Foreign Affairs building. This building was built in the area between the castle district and the residential area. It was 4 stories high, which happened to be level with the small highland where the castle was located. It was also the second concrete building after the Witches' Building. The original purpose of its construction was to house some of the more important prisoners, such as Duke Ryan's wife and daughter, who were detained in the basement. Although they were prisoners, the environment of the new residence was much better than the previous dungeon, and they also had time to take a walk every day. In her opinion, this was simply too good for the nobles. Perhaps His Majesty felt that he might not have so many enemies to house, so the above-ground area became the first place for the distinguished guests who came to Neverwinter for the first time. For example, the sages of the Alchemist Society of King's City, the Astrology Association, and the sea merchants of the fjords had lived here for a while. Since the rooms in the Foreign Affairs building were empty most of the time, and it was far from the heating system of the residential area, only running water was available. Because the identity of the residents was more complicated, His Majesty also added a team of personal guards here, which not only showed the importance of the guests, but also served as a watchdog. Of course, Nightingale did not want to alert the guards by taking the stairs. She went straight through the top floor and entered the bedroom where the witches lived. The afternoon inspection did not find anything unusual. The 4 witches' magic cyclones were very stable, and their capacity was not outstanding. They could be regarded as the most common kind. As for the content of the questions and answers, there were basically no lies, only some ambiguities when it came to talking about their past experiences. Her branch ability had keenly captured the subtle insinuations, but this was very normal. Along the way, she had suffered hardships, hunted, and even more unspeakable treatment, which would become a shadow in the witch's heart that she was unwilling to mention, so it was normal for ordinary people to want to hide it. If only these 4 witches came to Neverwinter, then she would probably have 4 more sisters. However, what caught Nightingale's attention was the ordinary girl called Number 76. There was no magic radiance on his body, and his demeanor was no different from an ordinary person, but she still felt that something was wrong. Later, when she thought about it, she found that what made her feel strange was Number 76's honest answer. Nightingale had seen many people pour out everything they knew until they were facing death. However, it was rare for a former maid of the Underground Chamber of Commerce to be honest with a stranger without any threat. But she could not judge the identity of Number 76 because of this reason. After all, Number 76 did not lie. The fact that she did not lie meant that the experience and origin she talked about so far were credible. In addition, what Yorko, Amy, and Annie said could also be corroborated. Number 76 was indeed a guide of the Black Money exhibition. She was bought by Yorko because she was involved in the witch auction. Therefore, Nightingale decided to sneak into the Foreign Affairs building at night and observe Number 76's behavior in the mist. If Number 76 was really up to no good, this would also be the moment when she was most likely to show her flaws. She walked through the bedrooms one by one and soon found the room where Number 76 was. The other witches had basically fallen asleep, but Number 76's room was still lit up. She was sitting on the bed, playing with the ring in her hand by candlelight. Her eyes were full of joy and intoxication. Is it because of the beautiful gemstone inlaid on the ring? Nightingale walked to the bed and quietly watched Number 76's every move. Except for admiring the ring over and over, Number 76 did not do anything suspicious. She was like a lucky person who was too excited to sleep with a treasure in her hand. Although the ring was shining with a tiny magic radiance, it was not surprising that there was such a magic stone in the exhibition, considering that some relics were often auctioned in the exhibition. After an hour, Number 76 was tired of admiring the ring, dropped her arms and closed her eyes. Nightingale sighed softly. It seems that I worry too much. She glanced at Number 76 for the last time, reached out to extinguish the candlelight, turned around and walked through the wall into the howling wind and snow. The heat of the colorful magic stone subsided, which proved that the person who used the magic power had left the bedroom. Number 76 was a little relieved. Even if they could get almost unlimited life through the soul transfer, it did not mean that they could stay up all night. It was just that after disconnecting the connection between the soul and the body, the efficiency of resting was much higher than sleeping. Therefore, in a day, she only needed to rest for 2 to 4 hours to recover. Usually, she fell asleep much later than the witches. She didn't expect that it was this difference that allowed her to observe such an incredible scene. Number 76 opened her eyes and looked at the empty bedside. Just now, a column of bright orange light appeared in the room. The light column was as thick as a torso and went straight to the ceiling, reflecting the other side of the ring into a golden color. This level of ki had surpassed the remaining senior witch of Tequila, Pasha, and was only second to the 3 chiefs of the Union. Although she could not see the figure of the visitor, she knew that it was not a simple invisibility spell, but a much more complicated ability. Is the visitor Anna or Leaf who Nana mentioned? Although there was still a certain gap between the requirements of the Chosen One and the orange light, Number 76 was excited to see such an orange light. The activation method of the colorful magic stone ring was very simple. As long as someone nearby was using the ability, the magic stone could absorb a small part of the surging magic power, thus showing the complexity of the ability. The specific manifestation was the light columns observed through the magic stone. The thicker the light column, the more complicated the key was. Number 76 became more excited as she thought about it. She simply walked out of the room and went to the top floor of the building. The wind and snow assaulted her face, yet she didn't feel the slightest bit of cold. If it was any other time, this feeling of emptiness and powerlessness would only make her feel tired. But now, she instead felt incomparably excited. She had a bold and unrestrained feeling of standing against the wind and chasing the last ray of light in the darkness. She raised the ring and pointed it in the direction of the castle. According to Vendi, the castle was where the witches lived. Now that the first senior witch had appeared, would the witch union give her more surprises? She was full of expectations. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. The ring in her hand suddenly trembled as if it was resonating with something. Chapter 697. How is this possible? Number 76 only felt a bang in her heart, and her whole body froze on the spot. There was a limit to the range in which the colorful magic stone could sense magic fluctuations. In theory, it was impossible to see the orange light phenomenon beyond 100 steps. She did not intend to observe anything at this distance. She just lifted the ring as she pleased, but why did this happen? After taking 2 deep breaths, she blinked and put the ring in front of her eyes again. The beam of light still did not disappear. What she saw was not an illusion, but a real scene. An indescribable excitement rushed into her mind, making her almost unable to control herself. Pasha, what kind of person is qualified to be called the chosen one? Do you see the edge of the ring? If the beam of light can fill the whole field of vision, then she is the chosen one we are looking for. That's too exaggerated. Even Lady Eleanor can only fill half of the field of vision. So that person's potential must exceed the 3 chiefs of the Union. I admit it's difficult, but we have no other way. Remember, the key doesn't represent the amount of magic power, nor does it equal to the level of combat power. So don't miss any witch. Fill the field of vision? Fill the field of vision? No. Pasha, the miracle I saw is far more than that. Number 76 swallowed. Even if she put the ring in the position closest to her eyes, she still could not absorb the entire beam of light into the magic stone. Its width was beyond the boundary of her field of vision. She had to move the ring horizontally to be able to see the full view of this huge wall. God finally smiled at human beings. Lady Natalia, you're right. I found the chosen one. When Roland walked into the bathroom with a yawn, he saw Zero lying in front of the washstand, washing her face and rinsing her mouth. Well, where's the toothpaste? The little girl moved aside and handed him a tube of toothpaste that was almost used up. Thanks. Roland fetched a glass of water and put the wet toothbrush into his mouth. Looking at the 2 people in the mirror, one tall and one short, squeezing in front of the narrow washstand and moving their elbows synchronously, he suddenly felt that this dream was full of joy. Zero spat out the foam in her mouth and rolled her eyes at him. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at your short stature. Roland replied in a nasal voice. Then he was kicked in the shin. Remember to shave, or you'll look too old. She combed her white hair and began to tie it into a ponytail. Don't embarrass me today. Isn't it just a parent-teacher meeting? He sighed and rinsed his toothbrush. I'm not your real family. I'm just your agent. You don't have to be so formal. Moreover, he couldn't dress up even if he wanted to. The clothes in his wardrobe were all from street stalls. It would be good enough if he could dress up to look energetic. By the way, I still think you look better with your long hair down. Roland smacked his lips and said, even if you want to tie it up, a double ponytail is more suitable. None of your business. Then he was pushed out of the bathroom. It seemed that after the end of the summer, the little lass's temper had grown. Was it because he had indulged her too much? After entering and exiting the dream world many times, Roland had now mastered the trick of entering the dream world. In other words, when he did not want to enter the dream world, this strange dream would not appear. Of course, he wouldn't have any other dreams. Instead, he slept until dawn. In this way, he could more easily control the passage of time in the dream world. In the past 2 months, in addition to further exploring the holy city of Hermes, Roland's remaining work was to wander around in various libraries and search for books that still left an impression on him. In addition, he found that the strange power flowing in his body was still effective even in the memory fragments. Because of this, his adventure in the snowfield was much smoother than he had imagined. Using the climbing rope and the drilling machine he bought, he even went deep into the pivotal secret area under the cathedral to check. Although he did not find the prayer room that Isabella mentioned, the secret historical records and the research on magic stones in the library were an eye-opener for him. However, he could not use the secret passage in the pivotal secret area to go to the old holy city. Halfway through the passage disappeared without a trace, leaving only endless darkness and the red lightning at the end, as if the other end had been swallowed by the void. It seemed that Zero still had a strong will to resist when she was defeated, so the remaining memory fragments only remained in this narrow area of the new holy city. Relying on selling the armors moved out of the holy city, Roland's savings were increasing rapidly. Finally, the living room was air-conditioned, and the refrigerator was replaced with a bigger one. The living conditions in the apartment building had improved significantly. Of course, there were still some troubles. Previously, when he tried to rescue Zero, many passers-by had taken photos of him running on the street. Not only did the photos get uploaded to the internet, but they also appeared on the local news channel. Fortunately, no one had clearly taken a photo of his face, and he had disposed of the clothes as garbage in time, so Zero did not see any clues. As for who this suspected martialist was and why he appeared in public in such a casual singlet and shorts, it even caused a heated discussion on the internet. Regarding this, Roland's opinion was, "Ahem, I'm really sorry that I don't have money." Now that he finally did not have to worry about living, he naturally shifted his attention to the other residents. He wanted to know whether the same gate of fragment was hidden in these people's rooms. Apart from stealing and swindling, the easiest way was to use money to knock on their door. "I'm ready, uncle. Let's go to school." Zero finished dressing and walked up to him with her school bag on her back. Today was the 12th of September, the first day of the new semester, so parents were required to accompany them. Roland's eyes involuntarily lit up. She had changed into a black short-sleeved shirt, a pleated skirt that did not reach her knees, and a pair of white stockings and sneakers. She looked very youthful and lovely. Her soft white hair was tied into 2 ponytails that draped over her shoulders, and yellow hair ribbons hung down from both ends. Paired with her impeccable facial features, delicate and translucent skin, and light red eyes, she looked like a fairy that had walked out of a painting. Roland could not help but reach out and rub her head. "That's right. I just happen to want to tie my hair like this. It's not because of what you said." "Yes, I know. It's true. I didn't say it's fake. Why do I feel that you're lying to me?" "That's because you think too much." Roland held back his laughter and pretended to be serious. "Let's go, or we'll miss the early bus." The content of the parent-teacher conference was just to sit in the back of the classroom and listen to the children's goals and promises for the new semester. Students at this age were not used to lying, so they always worked harder to achieve the goals they promised in front of their parents. Roland originally thought that this morning would pass peacefully, but he did not expect that the dream would be so unexpected. "Why is it you again?" A clear female voice rang in his ears. Chapter 698. Probably because she did not want to be recognized, she was wearing a checkered blouse, a pair of jeans, a pair of sunglasses, and a cap, which made her look very low-key. However, Prince Roland had such a deep impression of his third sister that he could immediately recognize her by her voice even if her face was covered up. Roland glanced at the note on the armrest to make sure that he was not sitting in the wrong position. He asked, "Why can't it be me?" "Humph." Apparently, she had also seen the name on the note and could only make a nasal sound of dissatisfaction. "By the way, you actually have a child? This is unbelievable. Did Garcia not only give birth to a child in the port of Clearwater, but also be swallowed by Zero in the Battle of Everwinter?" "Cousin," she spat out the 2 words coldly. Well, it seems that she is also a substitute. For some reason, Roland felt a little strange. Garcia's attitude towards him seemed to have changed from the first time they met. Although her impatience was still evident, the disdain and disgust she had shown in the beginning had disappeared. As the teachers arrived one after another, the parent-teacher conference finally began. After the teacher on the stage finished talking about the new semester plan, it was time for the students to make their speeches. When Zero stood up, there was a sudden burst of discussion among the parents, and the children all turned to look at her. It had to be said that it was really cheating to keep a witch's appearance in the dream world, especially her natural white hair and crystal-like red eyes, which enhanced her beauty to a unique level. Since the parents also had to stand up to accompany the students when they spoke, Roland had to enjoy the ceremony of being stared at. Zero was naturally someone else's child, while he was a good-for-nothing adult. This could be seen from the doubts and sneers in the other parents' eyes. Everyone was dressed as formally as possible, and Roland's casual outfit with cartoon short-sleeved shirts and half-length pants was really out of place. After returning to his seat, Roland felt that Garcia seemed to be peeking at him, which made him feel even more depressed. She was wearing sunglasses and had no scruples about peeking at him. If he stared back and found that she was not looking at him at all, it would be quite embarrassing. Not long after, he felt his elbow being poked by the other party, and a piece of paper was handed to him. Roland frowned and unfolded the note. The handwriting on it was as if it had been chiseled by a knife. Even if he did not understand calligraphy, he could feel the power contained in the strokes. However, the content made his heart skip a beat. "You're the mysterious martialist who was running on the streets a while ago, right?" How the hell did she know? Roland couldn't help but look at Garcia, only to find that she was still writing something. Soon, the second piece of paper was also in his hands. Don't deny it. Martialists are very sensitive when it comes to judging figures and remembering the details of movements. When I first saw the news, I felt that it was particularly familiar. Now I can finally confirm it. Did you awaken the force of nature not long ago, or have you been hiding your identity from the very beginning? Answer me honestly. Memory figure? How could it be so exaggerated? Even if I put those videos in front of him, he was not sure that he would be able to recognize me, right? But then again, Garcia would not go so far as to ask every person who had a similar figure. The fact that she could connect him with the mysterious martialist had, in a sense, proved that her observation skills were indeed far superior to that of ordinary people. Could this be the reason why she changed her attitude towards him? Roland hesitated for a moment. When he raised his hand, a pen was already in his hand. He was going to deny it and dismiss it as ridiculous, but when the tip of the pen touched the paper, an idea suddenly came into his mind. To be honest, his interest in martialists was only at the level of an onlooker, and he had no interest in fighting in the ring. In the dream world, he was at least half a god of creation. If he won, it would be natural. If he lost, it would be even more shameful. Judging from the current situation, he had not received any special training, and based on the level he had shown on TV, he would most likely lose. Compared to collecting books and exploring memory fragments, studying the force of nature was not a high priority. However, he found that this coincidental encounter might be a good breakthrough. If he could take this opportunity to get in touch with Garcia and find an excuse to go to her house, it would be naturally the best. Thinking of this, Roland scribbled his answer on the back of the note. What is the force of nature? I don't quite understand what you mean. This is something that even kids know. Why are you pretending to be stupid? After throwing the note, she took off her sunglasses and glared at Roland. So the sudden increase in strength is the awakening of the force of nature? Force of nature has far more than this. Have you never paid attention to the propaganda of the Martialist Association? I'm not interested in fighting, and I don't want to care about what you said. In addition to participating in competitions, martialists are also responsible for maintaining the order of the city and ensuring social security. What's that? It's a bit complicated. Let's find a place to talk about it. Very good. Roland applauded his own cleverness in his heart. Things seemed to be developing in the direction that he hoped. Really? But I have to go to the company in the afternoon. How about a visit in the evening? If he agreed now, then the meeting place was likely to be at a nearby coffee shop or restaurant. If he used an excuse to delay the meeting, then it would be difficult for the other party to refuse. After all, 0825 and 0827 were very close to each other. At this time, they would have already eaten dinner, and it would be too early for supper. Therefore, his home would be the most suitable place. Sure enough, after hesitating for a while, Garcia finally nodded. The students and parents spoke on the stage one by one. When it was her cousin's turn, the crowd burst into discussion again. However, this time, the focus of attention was changed from his grades and appearance to his status and background. Is he the son of the Clover Group? It seems that it's not his parents. They are all famous entrepreneurs. How could they have time to attend the parent-teacher meeting? Is this young lady also from the Clover Group? I think so. Judging from her dress, I can tell that she doesn't want to be noticed. It would be great if we could get in touch with her. Save it. Do you know who she is? Why would she talk to you? Who the hell is the Clover Group? Roland rolled his eyes. It sounded like a big company, but if that was the case, why would the relatives of the boss of the group live in a shabby tube-shaped apartment? Garcia's expression was a bit strange. Although her eyes were hidden under the sunglasses, her clenched fists and the lowered corners of her mouth revealed her attitude. Chapter 699. Night Meeting with Garcia. After dinner, after Zero went back to her room to review her homework, Roland came to the door of apartment 0827 as he had promised. He knocked on the door several times and it opened with a squeak. Garcia still had the same cold expression. Come in. Entering the apartment, Roland found that her decoration was much better than his own apartment. The floor had been replaced with a solid wooden floor. There was a special shoe cabinet at the door, a crystal chandelier overhead, and even the white paint on the wall had been repainted. Judging from the gloss, it was definitely not the original paint that had been applied in the early days of the apartment. I don't have extra slippers. You can wear mine first. She pointed to a pair of furry rabbit-eared slippers at the bottom of the shoe cabinet. I like to wear large ones. They shouldn't be too small for you. Roland tried to put his feet into the slippers. They were not small, but they were winter slippers. He felt hot all over. Besides, the furry rabbit ears on the slippers. He really could not imagine what Garcia would look like in these slippers. It was totally different from her indifference that kept people thousands of miles away. He walked to the sofa and sat down. By the way, do you have water here? I might have put too much salt in the dinner. Garcia frowned and glanced at him. I only have ice water. Then let's have ice water. While she turned around to go to the kitchen, Roland poked his head into the room. All the apartments in the apartment were basically the same, except that the two adjacent apartments were symmetrical on the left and right sides. 0827 was the next door, so the passage facing the door must lead to the storeroom. Sure enough, at the end of the passage, he saw a cubicle of similar size, but Garcia had obviously redecorated it and replaced it with a sliding shutter door. The good news was that this kind of sliding door was usually not locked. The bad news was that she might have dismantled the iron door and rebuilt the outer wall during the renovation. When Garcia returned to the living room with the water, Roland had already pretended to be indifferent, leaning against the sofa and watching TV. Thank you. He picked up the glass of water. Do you live here alone? During the parent-teacher conference this morning, they all said that you're from the Clover family. I'm not, Garcia interrupted coldly. 3 leaves have nothing to do with me. You can even say that we're enemies. Enemy? Roland was startled. Then your cousin, they know this and want cousin to persuade me to go back. She looked a little depressed. If I leave, the group can tear down the building. So the expansion of the shopping mall next door is a project of the Clover Group. Otherwise, who would dare to demolish these cultural relics in public? Garcia was puzzled. You live in a tube-shaped apartment. Why don't you know this? Oh no, the other party was not Zero, but a mature adult. If she inherited the character of Princess Tilly, it would be even more difficult to fool her. I rarely care about what happens in the streets. Besides, I lost my job a while ago and haven't been out for almost half a year. Roland hurriedly changed the topic. Do martialists have other jobs besides participating in competitions? Yes. Competitions are equivalent to competitions and training. Spreading martial arts to the audience and winning prizes are not the most important content. Our top priority is to fight against the erosion of the outside world. What erosion? Roland asked in surprise. You know about the fallen evils, right? They're one of the most common ones. They're not people who have awakened the force of nature and lost control of their power, but the erosion of the outside world has turned them into another kind of creature, Garcia said in a low voice. Ordinary force can't do much harm to fallen evils, so we need to stand up and fight against them. Roland could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, a faint sense of unease rising in his heart. The dream world was being eroded? What do you mean by the outside world? I can't tell you too much unless you join the Martialist Association and get a hunting license. Why? Because not all people who have awakened the force of nature will stand on the side of martialists, Garcia said word by word. Many people even hope that the forces of the outside world will enter our world. They're hostile to all human beings, so the hunting license not only allows martialists to fight against the fallen evils, but also allows martialists to kill those awakened people who try to disturb the stability of our society. So that's why it's called a hunting license? Roland suddenly felt a little creeped out. In other words, if he was confirmed to have awakened the force of nature and refused to join the association, wouldn't he become their natural enemy? Garcia seemed to see through Roland's concern and shook her head. There are indeed some people who don't want to join the Martialist Association or work for those evil people. These people are called the middle. The association won't do anything to them, but the fallen evils are different. Most of the middle people like to act alone, so they're often attacked by the enemy. So if you don't want to join the association, you'd better never expose your power. Looking at the Princess Tilly, Roland could not help but feel a little strange. She always looked indifferent, but in fact, she was not that difficult to communicate with. When he first met her, he even thought that she was an arrogant lady who did not like to look people in the eye. After he expressed his doubts tactfully, Garcia rolled her eyes. The first thing you did when you saw me was to reach for the weapon on your back. Do you think I should give you a look? Fortunately, you didn't take out your weapon, or you'd definitely go to the hospital and get a cast. Just then, Garcia's cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen and could not help but frown. I'll take a call. Then she picked up her cell phone, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door on her way. Obviously, she did not want Roland to hear the content of their conversation. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Roland immediately stood up, took off his rabbit-ear slippers, and walked quickly to the end of the corridor barefoot. Through the gap of the shutters, he saw the things stored in the compartment. Garcia had actually turned it into a cloakroom. In addition to a variety of dresses, there were also many women's underwear. However, nothing could stop him from exploring the truth of the world. Without hesitation, Roland pushed open the shutters and walked in, smelling the fragrance of the clothes. After passing through the layers of clothes, an iron blue door appeared in front of him. And he also noticed that there was a layer of dust on the handle of the door, which was in sharp contrast to the clean surrounding walls, although there was no padlock on the door. Did Garcia not enter or leave this gate of memory? But now was not the time to think about this. Roland took a deep breath and gently opened the door a gap. Chapter 700. It was already the next morning when Roland woke up from the dream. Roland waved his fist excitedly on the bed. His guess had come true. It was not just his room. Every resident in the apartment of souls should have a door that led to the memory fragments, and the place where the door was connected to was most likely the place where the defeated had placed their greatest hopes. If he was not mistaken, the last memory of Princess Garcia was in the port of Clearwater, the starting point of her lifelong struggle for the throne. Since Garcia might hang up at any time, Roland did not go further into the world behind the door to check. After all, he was in an awkward position, and it was not a pleasant experience to be treated as a clothes thief by a martialist. Before leaving 0827, Roland had tried to ask Garcia about the Gate of Memory by complaining about the useless iron door in his house. However, Garcia's response was very indifferent. She was not interested at all. This meant that either she was lying, or she did not notice the weird iron door even though she had renovated the whole utility room. If it was the latter, it would be worth pondering. Perhaps the residents in the Apartment of Souls could not access this dusty memory at all, and he was an exception, so he could see and open the memory gate. It was easy to verify this. Next time, he could ask Zero to go to the utility room with the excuse of cleaning, and then he would know the answer. All in all, this was definitely an exciting discovery. Of course, he did not need to investigate every resident thoroughly. The demon that Zero had devoured was the key. They had now become residents of the Apartment of Souls. If he could find them and enter their memory fragments, he might find some information that would be helpful to the battle of divine will. When he came to the office, Vendi had been waiting in the room for a long time. There was a stack of resumes on the desk, which were the detailed information about the 4 witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Although he had learned the general situation from Yorko, it did not prevent him from reviewing them completely, especially the things that happened in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Roland looked through the records written by Vendi and Scroll together, and his eyes finally stopped on Annie's name. When he first heard Annie's name, he found it particularly familiar. It was not until Nightingale reminded him that he remembered the grudge between the Bloodfang Association and the witches from the kingdom of Wolfheart. However, Annie was a very common name, especially among the poor. There were at least 5 or 6 Annis in 100 women, so it was not unusual for there to be repeated names. However, it was clearly recorded in her resume that she did seek out the Bloodfang Association. Not only was she rejected, but she was also almost sold to the nobles. Therefore, it was highly likely that she was the sister Annie that Iffy had mentioned. Needless to say, such a coincidence was full of drama. A week ago, he had received a secret flight letter from the Fjords, saying that Tilly and the others were already on the way. Now they were almost halfway through the flight. He just didn't know what kind of expression they would have when they met. The reunion was not all joy. Iffy would definitely be filled with joy and guilt. But what about Annie? Would she forgive the person who had betrayed her? Roland sighed inwardly, hoping that time could erase the scar. He closed the resume and looked up at Vendi. "Have you decided on today's itinerary?" "Yes, Your Majesty," the latter replied. "They are the North Slope Mine, the steam engine assembly plant, and the Chaos Drinks Factory." It was Vendi's idea to let the Witch Union lead the new witches to visit Neverwinter. She thought that it could better let the foreign witches familiarize themselves with the local life, and at the same time, eliminate some unnecessary precautions and misunderstandings. It had become the customary practice of the Witch Union for the witches to visit for 2 days, rest for 1 day, and then voluntarily choose whether to sign a contract or not. Since Roland entrusted the management of the witches to Vendi, she gradually got on the right track. Judging from the places she chose to visit, the cooperation between the witches and the subjects could be reflected, and it could also tell the assistant witches that their abilities were not limited to fighting. Roland nodded with satisfaction. "Then I'll leave it to you. Remember to take Lightning and Maggie with you. In case of any accidents, they can also help you control the situation." After all, Vendi was not good at fighting, and he did not think that every new witch would be as easygoing as Anna. With 2 more helpers in the sky and a revolver as a weapon, it would be enough to deal with most situations. "I see. By the way, what do you think of the guide?" He changed the topic. "Do you mean number 76? "Yes." Roland took a sip of tea. Normally, an ordinary ransomed slave did not deserve his personal attention, but Yorko praised her to the skies. After listening to the story of his old friend, he also developed a bit of respect for this woman who was willing to sacrifice herself to save others. If there were no problems with her background, it was not impossible to arrange an ideal job for her. She has a good relationship with the 4 witches, especially Amy, who almost treats her as her own family. I think if number 76 is a malicious person, it is unlikely that she would do such a thing in a critical moment. That's what I thought. How about letting her be a clerk in the Witch Union? I remember there are only 3 or 4 people in your office. With more people, it will be more convenient for you to manage. There were no additional requirements for this position, the salary was acceptable, and the work was easy, as long as she could build a good relationship with the witches. Vendi smiled. If she is willing, I have no problem with it. No. Your Majesty, Nightingale suddenly appeared and interrupted. Don't give her any position for the time being. Roland could not help but be startled. What's wrong? I don't know. She hesitated. I just feel that something is wrong. He looked at Nightingale strangely, and after a moment of silence, he said, I see. Let's put this matter aside. Yes, Your Majesty. After Vendi bowed and left, Nightingale held Roland's hand with a little concern. Sorry, Your Majesty, did I go a little too far? Is it because of the security problem? Then this is what you should do. He patted the back of her hand and comforted her. You are responsible for the internal security of Neverwinter, so you can't be blamed for being cautious. But your records don't show anything wrong with her. Is there something wrong? Chapter 701. When number 76 walked into the living room, the 4 witches were sitting around the round table and distributing the new food brought by the servants. Good morning, Amy greeted her first. Come and have breakfast. This time, besides bread, there are fried eggs and milk. I haven't tasted such a sumptuous meal for a long time. Well, she pretended to be happy and sat next to Amy. After losing her sense of taste, food was just to satisfy the needs of the body, and the process of eating became a complete torture. However, hundreds of years of training had allowed her to swallow these fragmentary, tasteless things without batting an eyelid. She could even praise them according to the increasingly fainter and fainter impression in her memories. Oh, this smells really good. Really? Amy said vaguely while chewing the egg. The last time I ate fried eggs was more than a year ago. Don't show off when it's only been more than a year. Broken Sword protested. I haven't eaten it for almost 10 years. Ahem. Annie cleared her throat. There's someone who hasn't eaten eggs since he was born. The 3 witches were stunned. Annie pointed to herself and said, When I was still in the village, the neighbor next door raised a flock of old hens. I always wanted to climb in and steal an egg to taste. But my father found me the first time I tried and I was almost beaten to death with a rolling pin. Your father is really an upright man, Hero said with admiration. Upright? She shrugged. He was just afraid that the neighbor would find out and ask him for compensation. I fed all the eggs I touched to myself and my brother. The living room suddenly fell into a brief silence. Ahem, let's eat first, Hero said with a little embarrassment. Amy was the first to laugh. Haha. I see, haha. With the first one, the others could not help but laugh. Even number 76 could not help but curl up the corner of her mouth. This group of witches who had been struggling all day long had finally found a place to live. Here, she seemed to see the shadow of Tequila in its heyday. No, it was no longer a shadow. She told herself that this place was about to become the new holy city and witches would inevitably rise again. Because the chosen one had appeared. Hey, didn't you sleep well last night? Amy reached out and wiped the corners of number 76's eyes. It's dark here. Ah, probably, number 76 lowered her head and said, I was so excited last night that I couldn't sleep. Although she only needed 2 to 4 hours of deep sleep to recover her spirit, it did not mean that she could stay awake all day. The overuse of her soul would still manifest in her body, and for them, this was the biggest taboo. After all, a damaged or aged body could be replaced, but a damaged soul was permanent. But how could she fall asleep? In other words, she did not want to fall into the dark sleep at all. No. 76 was afraid that everything was just a dream. When she woke up, the chosen one would disappear without a trace. What she needed to do now was to find out who the owner of the orange light was and contact Pasha. However, this was not an easy task. According to Vendi, most of the witches lived in the witch building in the castle district. She was not a witch, so she could not sneak into the castle by joining the Union. She could only rely on the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Of course, she could take the risk and sneak in alone to screen the chosen one by one. But the latter was definitely not a good choice. It was hard to say whether the chosen one would listen to her, and the green-haired witch with the ability to see through things was hard enough to deal with. Number 76 believed that it was impossible for her to lead the chosen one to escape from the maze ruins while being chased by other combat witches. Although the gods' punishment army was the witches' natural enemy, they were not invincible. In addition, the local lord's strength was also worth worrying about. The fact that he could defeat the Starfall city with a large number of gods' punishment army was a deterrent in itself. They had lost the foundation of reproduction. Even if they defeated the demons, they had to strengthen themselves with the power of mortals. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before they came into contact with the four kingdoms. Pasha was absolutely right about this. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Tequila should not become enemies with the kingdom of Grey Castle. Of course, if the king wanted to persecute the chosen one, she had no choice. She had to protect the person who could determine the fate of the Battle of Divine Will even at the cost of her life. Why don't you sleep for a while later? Amy covered her mouth and smiled. The servant said that lunch and dinner will be delivered on time. We don't have to beg for food like before. It's okay. Miss Nana has completely cured me. Number 76 first patted her chest to show that she was full of energy, and then showed a hesitant look. Lady Vendy will take you to visit Neverwinter later, right? I don't want to. Stay here alone. Then come with us, Amy answered at once. But there's nothing to worry about. We'll just walk around the street. With one more person, we can take turns to carry Hero. That's right, Broken Sword echoed. I don't like the feeling of staying in the room alone. I'll have to trouble you then. Hero smiled at number 76. Annie was much calmer. Don't worry. I'll mention it to Lady Vendy. Thank you. Number 76 bowed her head deeply. She had to admit that she had fallen in love with these juniors. Even though none of them could be called combat witches, the survivors of the Union had gradually changed their minds after more than 400 years of changing from prosperity to decline and living in the depths of the cave without seeing the light of dawn. However, the envisioned replacement of Hero did not come true. When Vendy came, she also brought a very exquisite wheelchair. Pushing the wheel can move back and forth, and rotating the wheel can also change direction. She personally demonstrated. It was made by Anna and Soroya overnight. With this, Hero can also move freely in a small area. Hearing the name Anna, number 76 could not help but be stunned. Isn't that the senior awakened that Nana claimed? Would they do this for an ordinary witch who had lost her legs? Thank you. Lady, Hero's voice was a little choked. You're welcome. Just treat Neverwinter as your home, Vendy said softly. As I said, all the witches here are your sisters. While Hero was trying out the wheelchair, Annie made a request to the person in charge of the Union. What made number 76's heart skip a beat was that Vendy did not immediately agree. Instead, she turned her head and looked at her. After a moment of silence, she gently nodded and said, Well, it doesn't hurt to have one more person. For some reason, she suddenly felt a sense of uneasiness in her heart. Chapter 702. However, it was pointless to worry now. Even if it would attract attention, she had to follow the four of them. This was the best chance to observe the city and the Witch Union closely. Otherwise, once they entered the castle district, it would undoubtedly be many times more difficult to contact them than it was now. Thinking of this, number 76 smiled timidly at Vendy and said, I'm sorry to bother you. I told you that Lady Vendy wouldn't mind, Amy said with a grin. Annie seemed to sense something. She looked at the two of them and did not speak again. Let's go. Vendy clapped her hands and said with a smile, Let's go. Today's first stop is the core area of Neverwinter, the North Slope Mine. Mine? Mountain? The five of them were stunned. What's so interesting about mining? Number 76 had such a thought in her mind, and she was willing to bet that the others were thinking the same thing as her. Whether in Tequila or the Kingdom of Dawn, mining was always done by slaves or prisoners. The environment in the mine was extremely poor. Coupled with the heavy physical work of digging and transporting, it was normal to die and be injured. Only those who had no value to their lives would be thrown into the mine to fend for themselves. Could it be that the other party's intention was to admonish them and tell them what would happen if they didn't listen to discipline? Rather than a mine, it's the source of Neverwinter's power. Vendi's tone was not threatening at all. Whoever can produce more steel will represent justice. This is also a sentence that His Majesty often says. It's a mouthful, isn't it? On the contrary, when she talked about the king, there was always a smile in her eyes. Anyway, you'll understand when you see it. Represent justice. Number 76 pondered this sentence several times in her heart. What's the relationship between the two? Walking out of the Foreign Affairs building, the snow on the street had been cleared. She did not know what the locals had done, but the hill-like snow piles were only a puddle of water. New snowflakes were still falling slowly, but much smaller than a few days ago. Busy freedmen could be seen everywhere. They seemed to have endless work to do, hurrying through the streets and alleys in the snow. It was obviously a harsh winter in the months of demons, but the whole city was full of vitality. The 5-colored stones started to heat up again. She looked around and soon found her target, 2 figures above her head. No, it was a man and a bird. They were probably here to monitor them. Number 70 SIXS evaluation of the Witch Union rose once again. Such means and strictness were almost the same as the small city-state associations in the Tequila era. It was completely different from the Wild Witch organization after the decline of the Union. In addition, she also confirmed that her judgment was correct. With the green-haired witch's clairvoyance and the tracking of the flying witches, it was impossible for her to escape after her identity was exposed. Since we have some time on the way, let me briefly introduce to you some knowledge about witches and their own abilities. The red-haired witch led them all the way to the north and said, "From the moment of awakening, witches will face the trouble of magic bite." The church once called it the demonic bite. In fact, it's just a natural reaction to the continuous growth of magic power, which you should already know. Yes, Annie nodded calmly. It's difficult for those who don't know to live past adulthood. I heard it from Broken Sword, Amy said, raising her hand. When wandering in the wild, it's inevitable to use their abilities. I was just guessing at that time, Broken Sword said with some embarrassment. It was the same for the Witch Cooperation Association. Fortunately, we survived, Vendi sighed. Once a witch reaches adulthood, her original ability will be further strengthened and there is a chance to give birth to a branch of ability. The specific manifestation is that the magic vortex in the body becomes clearer and stronger. What's that? Amy asked curiously. Something that every witch has, like a constantly rotating airflow. She touched the little girl's head lovingly. Only a few witches can see it directly. That is the specific manifestation of magic power. Its detailed shape determines the type of ability. Is that so? The latter asked in surprise. On the day of the ability test, these are the items that need to be recorded, Vendi said with a smile. At that time, you will know what the magic vortex in your body looks like. Number 76 could not help but frown slightly. Is this common knowledge about the continuation of witches a secret? What is Starfall City doing? The more witches survive, the more raw materials they have to make the gods' punishment army. Why do they even block this information? Has the witches of Starfall City deviated from the will of Lady Alice in the past 400 years? But the day of adulthood is not the end of a witch's ability. Beyond the solidification of adulthood, there is the ability evolution, Vendi continued. There is no limit to the number of times a witch can evolve, and it will not be limited to the original ability. As long as you continue to strengthen your understanding of yourself and magic power, your ability will continue to evolve. Really? Amy said excitedly. Can a witch like me also evolve? Of course, as long as you study hard. Saying this, she took out a thin silver plate inlaid with a red crystal and raised her head. Come to me, I want to introduce you to the new sister. That is, the sigil of listening. Number 70 SAX's pupils suddenly shrank. Why do wild witches have the legacy of the holy city of tequila? No. They did have this opportunity. For example, it would make sense to find 1 or 2 remaining sigil of listening from the ruins scattered around the witch empire. But this kind of standard equipment was generally issued to the blessed warriors. As far as she could remember, the Quest Society had never made such a simple sigil of listening. To be honest, it even looked a little like an unfinished product. Like a temporary experimental product made by a witch. As soon as the red-haired witch finished her words, the figure in the sky rushed down and soon landed on top of her head. It was a lovely blonde girl and her pet, a fat white pigeon. Everyone was startled. It seemed that they had yet to recover from the shock of the crystal that could produce sounds on its own. Nice to meet you all. The little girl smiled brightly. My name is Lightning, the greatest explorer in Neverwinter. I'm Maggie Coo. Coo coo coo. The pigeon spread its wings and said, My God, the bird is talking. Amy's eyes widened. They are witches, Annie said calmly. Their ability should be related to shape-shifting. You guessed right. Vendi stretched out her arm and let the pigeon land on it. And she is a sister with an evolved ability. So it's not a pet. Number 76 suddenly froze. Wait, what did I just say? This pigeon named Maggie is actually a senior witch? Seeing the pigeon rub Vendi's cheek without any dignity, curl its wings and raise its neck after hearing the introduction, as if to show off its strength, number 76 thought, Is this also a senior witch? In Tequila, they can enter the upper class of the Union and become one of the rulers of the Holy City. It was the iron rule of the Union to maintain respect in front of every promoted witch. Chapter 703. I didn't know this pigeon was so powerful. Amy exclaimed. Coo coo. Really? Lightning was not convinced. She just has the advantage of being older. When I become an adult, I will definitely evolve into a super powerful new ability. Then, can you tell me what Miss Maggie's new ability is? She has become a flying monster. Although she looks fierce and can cover the sky, she is not cute at all. Coo! Maggie drooped her head. A flying monster. I want to see it. Me too. The witches surrounded them and talked at once. Only number 76 was very anxious. These fools were all amateurs and could not get the key points from their questions. Who would care about whether a senior witch was cute or powerful? Shouldn't the key point be the relationship between ability evolution and magic cyclone, and how to become a senior witch? For the first time, she found it so difficult to maintain a smile. She had the illusion that the corner of her mouth was about to twitch. Seeing that the topic was getting more and more out of hand, she had to say, But Miss Maggie now looks no different from an ordinary pigeon. How can we tell that her ability has evolved? This question might increase the probability of her identity being exposed, but number 76 had no time to think about it. She still had a glimmer of hope in her heart. Maybe they knew the difference between the day of awakening and the solidification of adulthood, but they might still regard some branching abilities as senior awakening. After all, some lucky witches might have multiple branching abilities. Judging from the magic power, Vendi answered her. If the magic power of an ordinary witch is like a cyclone or mist, it will condense into a new shape after evolution. For example, Maggie's current magic power is a stretch of white wings, which is very different from the fuzzy mist before. Magic power condensation and reconstruction were exactly the same as the Union's definition. The last doubt was shattered. If Vendi was not lying, then Maggie was indeed a senior witch. Although number 76 did not have the means to directly observe magic power, since Vendi could say it with such certainty, she obviously had a more comprehensive understanding of evolution. So that's how it is. She suppressed her surging emotions and revealed a look of sudden realization. Your ability is also like this? I didn't gather magic power, Vendi replied frankly. Compared to Anna and the others, I still have a lot to learn. So, an original which became the manager of the entire alliance and even fought with a higher ascendant? Looking at the pigeon's intimate and easy-to-understand expression, number 76 suddenly had a feeling that she had indeed slept for too long. This world was totally different from the tequila she was familiar with. However, the witches from the kingdom of Wolfheart did not feel the complicated feelings in Maggie's heart at all. Apart from Annie, the other three witches teased Maggie and laughed with each other all the way. While climbing up the mountain path, number 76 deliberately lagged behind. She put the finger with the 5-colored stone ring to her eye socket and pretended to rub her eyes. In fact, she was squinting at Lightning and Maggie through the crystal-clear magic stone. As both of them were in the stage of displaying their abilities, 2 eye-catching orange lights suddenly appeared in her vision. The light beam above Lightning's head was similar to that of Annie and the others, about the thickness of a finger, while Maggie's was thicker, almost as thick as an arm. This was in line with the theory that the key of a senior which should be more complicated. But compared with the light beam from the intruder last night, it was much smaller, not to mention the giant light beam in the castle district which was like a mountain wall. They were not the chosen one. With mixed feelings, number 76 wrote down their names. After entering the North Slope mine, the noise became louder and louder. The witches were surprised to see that the surroundings of the mine were still bustling with activity. The scattered snowflakes and the cold wind did not make them stop their work. Along the way, they could see busy figures everywhere. Unlike what they had expected, they were definitely not dressed like ragged prisoners. Instead, they were all wearing thick fur coats with cloth of different colors wrapped around their heads. It seemed that they were distinguishing the content of their work in this way. Near the entrance of the mine, the ground was covered with many iron bars of equal width. 4-wheeled carts were running on the iron bars. There were no people pushing or pulling the carts, nor were there any horses or donkeys. Bright banners were hung along the tracks, embroidered with huge slogans. Labor is the most glorious, win the future with your hands, 10 years of labor, 100 years of housing, etc. The crimson banners, white snow, and black tracks constituted the 3 main primary colors in the mine. Before His Majesty became the Lord of Border Town, the ore produced here every quarter could only be exchanged for hundreds of golden dragon. In winter, in order to cope with the months of demons, the ore could not be produced. The local people couldn't even feed themselves with their salaries. Vendy stopped and turned around, saying slowly, after His Majesty came to the western region, he saved a witch named Anna, which opened a new door for witches and ordinary people to cooperate. Do you see those black steel machines? They were made by Anna herself. They can replace manpower to tow the mining carts and remove water. They don't need magic power to drive them and can be operated by anyone. With these devices, the output of the mine has increased more than 10 times. Not only can people's salaries fill their stomachs, but they can also buy new clothes or a place to live. It is this visible benefit that gradually made the townspeople accept the existence of witches. The question you asked before, what is a witch's job? This is the answer: to create the better life. Vendy stroked the red hair in front of her forehead and said proudly, if you are willing to join the Witch Union and work together to build this city and this home, the people will firmly remember your names in the future. It could be seen that even Annie, who had always been calm, was moved. She gently opened and closed her hands that held the wheelchair, revealing the emotions in her heart without a doubt. The others were a little stunned after hearing the words, the home of witches. For these refugees, there was nothing more exciting than a warm place to live. Only number 76 was full of doubts. The key to the change described by Vendy was not the witches, but the black machines. How did a local commoner, who was at the bottom of the hierarchy even among mortals, know how to make them? Awakening could only improve her ability and physical fitness, but it would not give her knowledge that she had never seen before. What happened during this period? What Wendy said next made number 76's heart skip a beat. Chapter 704. Passing through a mountain road guarded by many guards, the red brick wall appeared in the snow forest. From the sentries along the road, it could be seen that number 76 would not be allowed to enter such a forbidden area if she acted alone. Senior witches finally had the appropriate treatment. At least such a large number of guards would not bring shame to the name of the promoted. Although she didn't quite understand why this genius would build his residence in the North Slope mountain range, it was a little difficult to understand. In addition, she still maintained a skeptical attitude towards Wendy's statement. In any case, a senior witch who had awakened twice in a row at such a young age sounded too unbelievable. Although the number of awakenings did not represent the strength of one's ability, the perseverance, intelligence, and perception required to awaken twice were incredibly high. There were only a few such people in the entire Union. She did not expect to meet one in the kingdom of the common people. As they got closer to the wall, number 76 found something wrong. Is this really the witch's residence? Over the top of the wall, she could only see a few roofs made of canvas. Not to mention castles or stone towers, she could not even see a one-story bungalow. Here we are. Vendi knocked on the gate of the courtyard wall. The backyard of the North Slope Mountain is the research and development place for all kinds of machinery and equipment in Neverwinter. Except for studying time, Anna usually stays here to work. To ensure her safety, His Majesty blocked the entire mountain road and forbade unrelated people from entering or leaving. So it's just a research institute. Number 76 frowned secretly. And the guards on the road don't belong to Anna, but are sent by the king? Although they say they are protecting her, they are probably monitoring her. Sister Vendi, a lively little girl, opened the door. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Good girl, where's your sister? She's doing a machine test with Sister Anna. And this is? Amy asked. Lucia's sister, Ling White, Vendi introduced. She's now a reserve clerk of the Union and has not yet awakened as a witch. Hello, the little girl greeted politely. Please come in. Lucia White is also a frequent visitor here. Together with Anna, she is responsible for the research on metal materials. Vendi led everyone into the yard. By the way, her ability evolved when she was an adult, and the increase in her magic power was only second to Anna. She's one of the few witches in the Union who can cast the sigil of God's will. Hearing this, number 76 almost tripped over the threshold. Wait, what did she just say? Sigil of God's will? Fortunately, someone quickly asked, what talisman seal? The sigil of God's will, Vendi repeated with a smile. A weapon that requires an extremely large amount of magic power to be used. It was very difficult for ordinary people to light up the 4 magic stones, so His Majesty hung them on the wall of the castle hall for everyone to test their magic power. If you join the Witch Union in the future, you can also experience it yourself. Currently, there are only 4 people in the Alliance who can light up the last magic stone. Everyone is guessing who will be the 5th. Hang it in the lobby? Only 4 people? Number 76 felt like she was listening to an Arabian Nights story. Not to mention where they got the sigil of God's will, just hearing the name again was enough to surprise her. In the Tequila era, it was the exclusive weapon of the 3 chiefs of the Union. Except for the Transcendents who were training all the time, no one else could provide the magic power needed by the Golden Thunder. But here, there were only 4 witches who could activate the sigil? What a joke! Did the Witch Union have more Transcendents than the Union? And according to Vendi's description, neither Anna nor Lucia were Transcendents. How could they become Transcendents? In addition, what the King of the Common People did made her feel unreasonable. Since someone could activate the sigil of God's will, he should have seen the earth-shattering power of the sigil, right? If so, why would he put such a precious weapon in the hall for all witches to play with? That was a spoil of war obtained after slaying a greater demon. Did this guy have any common sense at all? Number 76 suddenly felt her head swelling and pain. As for the fact that Lucia was also a senior witch, her heart had gradually become numb to it. In just one morning, she had seen 3 promoted witches. At this moment, she just wanted to ask someone how many senior witches there were in such a border city ruled by common people. Moreover, they did not even have the self-awareness of being superior. For example, now, Lucia had already mingled with the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart under the introduction of lightning. Anna was much calmer, but judging from her expression, she did not seem to have any complaints about the original witches acting as managers. She even showed a sense of closeness and trust in Vendi during their simple conversation. Just when number 76 could not help but blurt out the question in her heart again, someone finally mentioned this point. "May I ask how many people in the Witch Union have evolved new abilities?" Broken Sword's question was no less than the sound of nature in her ears. But Vendi's reaction shocked her. Vendi counted with her fingers. "Well, 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, exactly 10. 10. Number 76 did not even have the strength to be surprised at this time. If the information provided by Black Money was right, there were only about 20 witches active in the western region of Grey Castle. Neverwinter was just her first stop, and Sleeping Island in the fjords was the gathering place of most witches. However, there were 10 senior witches here. Was this a mockery of the Union's incompetence? Number 76 took a deep breath and did not approach them again. Instead, she took advantage of the time when they showed their abilities to put the ring to her eyes. Lucia's orange light was almost twice as bright as Maggie's, while Anna's was much more eye-catching. It was almost the same size as the uninvited guest who sneaked into the Foreign Affairs building at night. There was no doubt that the two of them were not the chosen one either. It seemed that the owner of the light wall in the castle was someone else. But was it possible? Was there a witch in Neverwinter who was more outstanding than the genius mentioned by Vendi, Anna, who had awakened twice in a row? Just when number 76 was puzzled, the door of the backyard was suddenly pushed open, and a blue-haired woman came in. "The anti-corrosion results you asked for have come out. These are the test samples." She placed several glass bottles in front of Anna. "The best performance of the aluminum alloy is number 1872, just as His Majesty speculated." "Thank you, Agatha. Then I'll go." The witch called Agatha nodded and turned to leave without looking at the others. Her demeanor was quite similar to that of a superior in the tequila era. The moment she turned her head, number 76 felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. Chapter 705. That was right. Even after more than 400 years, the name had become blurred, but the scene at that time was still vivid in her mind. The blue-haired witch knelt on one knee in front of the 3 chiefs of the Union, solemnly received the robe and scepter that symbolized a higher ascendant, and received the personal blessing of the leader of the Quest Society. Number 76 deeply remembered her posture when she turned around and raised the scepter to the audience. As the youngest senior witch born in the tequila era, her proud and confident expression was like a brand in the hearts of all onlookers. At that time, number 76 was just a member of the garrison guard, the original combat witch. At that time, when she looked at the high-spirited young junior, she only felt infinite envy and a trace of inferiority. So this witch is Agatha. The dusty memories reappeared in her mind in an instant. She even remembered that Agatha had violated the Quest Society's principle of never hiring mortals and was expelled from the core research circle because of some outrageous actions. However, Agatha did not repent at all. She directly built her own research tower outside the city of Tequila. Because of her status and identity, no one stopped her. If an original witch dared to openly oppose the Quest Society, she would probably be sent to the front line until she became one of the casualties in the bloody defensive war. At that time, number 76 was quite dissatisfied. She thought that she should not have done such a thing in the face of a formidable enemy. For the Quest Society, it was equal to losing a young and promising ascendant. For her, it was equal to losing most of the resources and foundation to explore the mystery of Magic Stone. Adding up the two, it was the loss of the holy city of Tequila. But now, all her dissatisfaction had long disappeared with the destruction of the Union and the passage of more than 400 years. Now, there was only joy in her heart, and incredible surprise. She was happy that she could actually meet a tequila witch here. She was surprised that this tequila witch had survived until now. There was no doubt that Agatha still maintained the body of a witch. Even her appearance and age seemed to stay in that era, without any trace of aging. The bodies of the other survivors had long since turned into bones, and only their souls were preserved through special methods. Number 76 tried her best to restrain the impulse to stop her immediately. She watched her leave without moving and took a deep breath until the gate of the courtyard wall was closed again. She already knew what to do next. What's wrong? Did you find something wrong? When the sky gradually turned dark and the howling cold wind became biting cold again, Nightingale noticed that Sylvie's expression had changed a little. Number 76 has left the Foreign Affairs building. She jumped out from the window of the corridor on the second floor, the latter replied. Oh. Nightingale raised her eyebrows. Aren't those windows sealed with iron bars? It's probably rusted. The whole window frame fell off with a shake. Sylvie stood in front of the French window, looking down at the city that was slowly disappearing into the darkness. She climbed over the wall, and the guards at the gate didn't notice anything. But we still found her. Nightingale could not help but raise the corner of her mouth. There's really something wrong with her. Since Roland's safety was more important, she called Sylvie and asked her to monitor the tour directly from the office in the castle. Nothing unusual was observed in the morning. Everything was normal. After the witches of the Kingdom of Wolfheart had lunch, Number 76 suddenly showed an uncomfortable look. Judging from her lips, it seemed that she was tired because of a sleepless night. Finally, under the persuasion of the witches, she got dressed and lay on the bed in her bedroom, directly missing the afternoon tour. Nightingale had thought that the day would pass peacefully, but unexpectedly, as dusk approached, Number 76 made an unexpected move. You guessed it. Roland closed the book with great interest. But an ordinary person can actually escape your lie detection. She's a genius. Nightingale coughed twice. When I catch her, I'll figure out how she did it sooner or later. Number 76 is moving south along the side street outside the castle district. Wait, she stopped by the street, Sylvie reported. It looks like she's waiting for someone? She doesn't have magic power and she doesn't carry any weapons. She's either here for intelligence or colluding with others to plan something big, Nightingale analyzed with high morale. If it's the former, she should have lurked for a longer time. Since she's so impatient, maybe she'll make a move tonight. Make a move? Against who? Sylvie asked. Well, we'll know later. Half a quarter of an hour later, Sylvie's voice suddenly froze. Hey, she's moving again. Her target seems to be. Oh no, isn't that Agatha? It's the shift change time in the factory now. It's normal for her to appear here. Nightingale frowned. But Agatha is a combat witch, and she doesn't have a god's stone of retaliation. Are you sure Number 76 is going for her? Agatha has made a move. How could it be? Sylvie exclaimed in disbelief. Number 76 has a god's stone reaction. The news made Nightingale and Roland's expressions change. Nightingale. I'll go there now. Before Roland's voice died away, Nightingale had already disappeared into the mist. Sylvie, protect His Majesty for me. Agatha's hands stopped in the air, and her heart suddenly sank. This was a small street leading to the castle district. Few townspeople would pass by here, especially at dusk. When she noticed that someone was approaching her from behind, she turned around without hesitation to summon ice and directly froze the person's feet. However, the ice that appeared out of nowhere only lasted for a breath's time before disappearing in the blink of an eye, as if it had never existed. This is a god's stone of retaliation? No, if it's a god's stone, the ice should not be able to get close to me. Just now, the magic power had condensed into an icicle and then dissipated. How could this be? But Agatha understood that it was not the time to investigate further. Following her in this secluded street and having the ability to dissolve magic power, it was obvious that the person had come prepared. Just as she was prepared to take the attack head-on, the person's actions caused her to freeze in place. She saw the person raising her elbows, pressing her fingers on her chest and bowing deeply to her. She had not seen this kind of etiquette for a long time. It was the standard etiquette that members of the Union had when they met their superiors in the tequila era. "You are?" Agatha could not help but ask. Chapter 706. Number 76 closed the door, isolated herself from the hustle and bustle in the tavern hall, and then sat down opposite Agatha. She knew that once she left the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart, she would be more likely to be exposed, but hiding her identity was no longer a priority. "I thought you would take me to a deserted corner." Agatha looked around the compartment and said, "I didn't expect it to be this kind of place." "The tavern has always been a good place for exchanging information and bonding, my lady." Number 76 poured a glass of ale for her. "I hope you won't blame me for not providing a more elegant environment for negotiation. After all, I've only been in Neverwinter for 2 days." Since there was no need to worry about exposing her identity, the tavern could obviously lower the other party's guard to some extent. It was safer to talk in a crowded place than in an empty street corner or alley. Although both of them were not afraid of the cold, if a stranger suddenly appeared and wanted to lead the other party to a more desolate place with just a few words, she would not easily agree. And the most important thing was that she had no hostility toward either Neverwinter or the Witch Union, so there was no need for her to take the initiative to put herself in the enemy's position. Previously, she had hidden her identity just to find the chosen one. Now that there was a better way, she naturally would not act according to her original plan. Now, both the common people and the witches were facing the same enemy, and the danger was imminent. "How did you find me in only 2 days?" "Your workplace, the time you returned to the castle, and the way back to the castle." I could ask the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart about the first 2 things from Vendi, and the latter from the local people. Number 76 briefly explained the process. "After knowing that you've become a member of the Witch Union, I decided to take the initiative to contact you." "I see." Agatha looked at her with burning eyes. "So, there are other witches of tequila who survived?" "You can think of it that way, but we are no longer witches." Number 76 knew that the only reason why Roland was willing to contact her was because of the news about tequila, so she did not hide anything from him. Bodies can't be preserved for hundreds of years, so we can only use another method to keep our compatriots alive. For example, the body you're looking at now is that of a god's punishment warrior from the church. "You mean, not only do you control this body, but you can also activate the God's Stone realm?" "Yes, this is also Lady Alice's ultimate goal, to fuse a witch and a mortal into a scourge who can fight against demons. Losing more than half of the blood won't cause the witch to die immediately. As long as the soul is transferred to the body in time, the perfect, extraordinary warrior will be obtained." I knew her plan wouldn't be that simple. Agatha was silent for a long time before she finished the ale in her glass. "But from your tone, it seems that the other survivors don't agree with this plan? Also, what is your purpose for coming here?" "Before answering this question, I want to ask you something very important," Number 76 said in a low voice. "Go ahead. Have you told the Witch Union about the demons, the battle of divine will, and the Union?" Agatha nodded. Number 76 suddenly showed a trace of excitement. "What about them? Did they accept this statement?" "Not only did they accept it, but they are also ready for the 3rd battle of divine will," she replied. "In fact, not long ago, the Witch Union fought with the demons and killed a magic slayer and 4 fearsome demons." Number 76 could not help clenching her fists. Everything was as she had expected. Agatha had indeed revealed this information to the local witches. In this way, the Union and tequila had become natural allies. She no longer needed to hide her identity and could get straight to the point. Although the latter part of Number 76's words was also thought-provoking, and she also wanted to know where the witches of the Witch Union met the senior demon before the Bloody Moon came and how they defeated it, there were more important things to talk about now. No longer hesitating, Number 76 told Agatha about the fight between Natalia and Alice and the Chosen One plan from beginning to end. Now the witch who can activate the natural mote instrument and wipe out all the demons is in the castle district. "I hope you can help me find her." Agatha was also a little stunned. Is there really someone who can do this? Lord Theo told me so. Number 76 took off the ring and handed it to Agatha. As long as someone exerts his ability, he can see the orange light that symbolizes the key through the colorful magic stone. Agatha pursed her lips, took the ring and looked at it for a while. I think you should talk to the Lord of Neverwinter. Of course, I'll explain everything to Vendi. But Number 76 was stunned. The Lord of Neverwinter? You mean the local leader of the common people? Yes, Roland Wimbledon, the common man who looks ordinary and even a little reckless. Somehow, Agatha smiled. He's the core of the Witch Union. Number 76 frowned. I don't quite understand what you mean. I was just like you at the beginning. Agatha returned the ring to number 76. Later, I gradually realized that without Roland, the Witch Union wouldn't exist, Neverwinter wouldn't be what it is now, and Grey Castle wouldn't be able to defeat the church. Everything started with a common man. If you want to find and take the chosen one away, you need to talk to Roland in person instead of explaining the situation to Vendi. But don't worry. He knows more than you think. Agatha chuckled. Do you know what he said to me when I woke up from the ice coffin and learned that the Union no longer existed? The common man can defeat the demons. Isn't this a little too arrogant, isn't it? She interrupted. I thought so at first. But in fact, I saw hope in him, and the other witches in Neverwinter firmly believe in him. So if Tequila wants to cooperate with the Witch Union to fight against the demons, you have to get Roland's approval. Number 76 doubted her ears for a moment. If Roland was a wild witch, it would be understandable for her to agree with the common man's power. After all, after more than 400 years of changes, it was no longer the era when the Union ruled the continent and witches were superior. But Agatha was a Tequila witch through and through. Why would she trust the common man so much? This trust was far more than recruiting a common man as an experimental assistant. Although she had the task of contacting the secular regime from the beginning, she did not expect it to be carried out in this situation. Number 76 put away the ring and was silent for a moment. Please let me think about it. Chapter 707. You can come out now. Agatha looked at the empty corner of the compartment. As she spoke, a faint shadow appeared on the wall, and then Nightingale appeared out of thin air, blocking the dim candlelight in front of her. When did you discover me? There was a hint of surprise in her tone. When I took the ring from number 76. Agatha shrugged and raised the flagon. Do you want a glass? If you pay. Nightingale sat down opposite the ice witch. Can you see magic power with that magic stone? Not magic power, but an orange beam of light or key. The latter took out an empty glass, filled it, and pushed it in front of her. Your beam of light illuminated half the room. It was hard not to notice. Did she notice it too? Most likely. Agatha nodded. She didn't mind revealing her identity in front of her own kind. She and I are not the same kind, just like I'm not the same kind as the pure witch, Nightingale said in a low voice. Why, do you believe what she said? I do. But you didn't accept her ring. Because I want to help her and let her walk on the right path. Agatha also poured herself a cup of ale and drank it in one gulp. The quality of the ale was quite poor, far inferior to the fruit-flavored white wine made by Evelyn, let alone the oddly tasty turbid drink. Even so, the sour bitterness could not suppress the joy in her heart. Agatha felt very happy. The moment number 76 revealed her identity, a vague sense of loneliness disappeared from her heart. She was not the last survivor of Tequila. There were other witches of the Union like her, who had crossed the river of time for more than 400 years to this era. Although most of the members of the Witch Union were very friendly and Vendi also cared for her, Agatha always felt a lingering sense of loss. She knew that this gap had accumulated for hundreds of years and could not be filled in a short period of time. Facing the witches of the new era, she had no one to talk to about this loneliness. Being immersed in work all day was also a kind of numbing action. The only exception was Roland Wimbledon. Only when she was alone with this strange mortal would she feel a trace of empathy and comfort. At first, she found it hard to understand, but later she found that there was also an indescribable estrangement on Roland, as if he was incompatible with this world. But he hid it better, and almost no one could notice it. But now, she was finally not alone anymore. Because of this, Agatha hoped that Roland and Roland could stand together and ask each other to visit Roland Wimbledon. She wanted to see the two of them stand hand in hand and go through the battle of divine will together. She had already fallen in love with life in Neverwinter, and naturally hoped that her compatriots would also like it here. In addition, Agatha also had a small hidden thought in her heart. She wanted those witches to see that her previous view was wise and correct. The cooperation between mortals and witches was the best way to fight against the demons. Is this why you deliberately ignored her? Nightingale's eyes were complicated, as if it was the first time she saw her true thoughts. Number 76 will understand after she stays here for a while. Agatha raised the corner of her mouth. Isn't that how I came here? This group of survivors was different from the church. They did not agree with the plan of the God's Punishment Army and were unwilling to use witches as materials. They even broke up with Lady Alice because of this. This was also one of the reasons why Roland decided to help them. After that, Nightingale kept silent for a long time until the flickering candlelight was extinguished. Then she gradually disappeared and returned to the darkness. I hope she will make the right choice. She will. Agatha smiled. I believe her. Number 76 returned to the Foreign Affairs building along the same path and happened to meet Annie and the others who had just finished visiting the beverage factory. I feel much better after I woke up. She took the initiative to explain before anyone spoke. I just felt a little stuffy in the room, so I walked around the yard. You should wear more clothes in case you catch a cold, Broken Sword said with concern. Amy took her hand and said cheerfully, It's a pity that you didn't go with us this afternoon. The chaos drinks made by Miss Evelyn are simply the most incredible things in the world. Chaos drinks? Yes, she could only change the taste of the drinks. After her ability evolved, she can create delicious drinks with unique tastes. I swear that even the nobles of Wolfheart City have never tasted such amazing things. Amy looked very excited. Black tea, honey milk, and fine wine are not worth mentioning in front of it. Another senior witch. Number 76 was already numb. Although she still did not know what exactly Vendi and Nana meant by learning, there was no doubt that the Witch Union had gone ahead of the Union in training witches. But according to Agatha, the root of all this seemed to be Roland Wimbledon, a mortal, which was what puzzled number 76. Could it be that a mortal knew more about magic power than a witch? I can testify, Hero echoed. For a moment, I even felt that all the hardships I had encountered before were worth it. If I can drink it occasionally in the future, I don't want to leave Neverwinter. Amy stuck out her tongue. Then we might as well join the Witch Union, Broken Sword suddenly said. As long as we stay here, we'll always have a chance to drink it again, right? I agree. Amy immediately raised her hand. Me, too, Hero nodded seriously. The three of them looked at Annie, who shrugged helplessly and said, I'll listen to you. Wait. Do you agree to stay here just for a strange drink? Number 76 could not help but be stunned. And Annie, didn't you say that we should observe carefully and treat with caution? You should at least see tomorrow's visit before making a choice. If Vendi knew the reason why they made up their minds, she would probably not know whether to laugh or cry. Somehow, a feeling of envy suddenly rose in her heart. Simple request, easy decision. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, they will move forward without hesitation. What about me? When everyone fell asleep, number 76 quietly left the room again and climbed to the roof. Facing the howling wind and snow, she raised the ring and pointed it in the direction of the castle. She squinted her eyes and looked at the light beam that was as wide as the city wall once again appeared in front of her. Even without magic activation, even though it was far beyond the theoretical detection range, it still appeared in her vision like a miracle. She needed to find the chosen one for the Tequila Witches, which was the main purpose of this trip. But taking a step back, the significance of the chosen one to the survivors seemed to be no different from the significance of chaos drinks to Amy and others. She made a decision in her heart. The next day, when Vendi came to the Foreign Affairs building as promised, number 76 handed a letter written overnight to her. I'm Phyllis, a tequila witch from the hopeless labyrinth. I bring news about the divine will and the savior of the world. I hope to meet the Lord of Neverwinter and discuss the battle of divine will together. She did not avoid the witches from the kingdom of Wolfheart, but stood in front of everyone and said solemnly. Amy and the others all widened their eyes, as if they had heard some unbelievable news. Number 76. What are you talking about? So you're also a witch? That's great. Phyllis, is that your real name? The three of them had different reactions. Only Annie remained silent. Chapter 708. Roland had learned the general situation of number 76 from Nightingale. In fact, he was very interested in that dusty history, not to mention that the tequila witches claimed to have information about the divine will. Now that number 76 came to him, it saved him a lot of effort. Of course, in case of accidents, in addition to Nightingale, Sylvie, and Scroll, Leaf and 2 special potted plants were also in the office. Once number 76 used the ability of the latter, she could not immediately eliminate the growing vines even if she used the god's stone realm. As long as she slowed down a little, Nightingale could take out her gun and shoot her into a sieve. Potted plants looked just like decorations, and if he didn't activate them with his ability, they wouldn't pose any threat at all. Thus, Roland avoided the awkward situation of sending a group of personal guards to surround the room. He couldn't let the other party look down on him before he even started negotiating. When number 76 followed Vendi into the office, Roland smiled and spread out his hands. Welcome to Neverwinter. Do you need a pair of tactical sunglasses? Everyone was silent. Nightingale rolled her eyes and pinched Roland's shoulder hard in the mist. Your Majesty, please don't talk nonsense at this time. Ahem, okay. Roland cleared his throat and changed back to his usual calm look. So you're number 76 of tequila? My name is Phyllis, Your Majesty. Number 76 put one hand on her chest and lowered her head slightly. Number 76 is just a disguise for a common person. Now that you've discovered my identity, this name has lost its meaning. The hand on the chest salute was suitable for the upper nobles to meet the members of the royal family. It could also be used as a common salute for ambassadors to visit other countries. Obviously, Phyllis was not ignorant of secular etiquette. As for the title and the slightly inappropriate wording, Roland did not take it to heart. Compared with the superficial reputation, he cared more about the practical benefits. Let's sit down and talk. He nodded. I happen to have a lot of questions to ask you. If I can, Phyllis said solemnly. Probably because she hadn't talked to a mortal like him for a long time, her expression was very stiff. She probably wanted to maintain the foundation of politeness without losing the arrogance that once ruled the world. Recalling Yorko's description of her, Roland could not help but laugh in his heart. When she was disguised as a maid, she could be very charming. Now that she had changed back to her official identity, even if the witch empire had long fallen apart, she still insisted on maintaining her pride. Needless to say, the name tequila had already become a part of their beliefs. First, there's news about you too. After all, if we want to fight the demons together, it's better to know each other's details. Roland took a sip of tea and asked unhurriedly, to be honest, I've always been curious about how the Union was split into 2 factions. Everyone is a witch, so why does the church want to beat up their own kind? Especially after knowing that the God's Punishment Army has a perfect form, this question has become even stronger. Can you tell me the reason in detail? Phyllis probably did not expect him to ask this question first. After a moment of silence, she replied, before entering the ruins of the maze, no one could have predicted that things would end up like this. What do you mean? Does it have something to do with the ruins? Without the ruins, there wouldn't have been the plan of the gods' punishment army, and the remaining witches wouldn't have survived. Unfortunately, we discovered it too late. At this point, she sighed softly. In addition to finding the method of soul transfer in the maze, the fugitives also found some other things. Because of them, Lady Natalia and the Queen of Starfall City had a disagreement, which led to the final rupture. Other things? Roland frowned. I can't tell you more for the time being. Only after finding the chosen one can we have a deeper discussion. At that time, Lady Pasha will talk to you personally. Who's Pasha? She's the successor of the 3 chiefs of the Union, and also the trusted leader of the survivors, Phyllis explained. If he was not mistaken about the time, the Holy City should have fallen at that time. The fact that a group of fugitives who were on the brink of death did not hesitate to use internal strife to resolve their conflict could only be said to be as important as the divine will. Couldn't the 2 sides coexist at that time? Since the perfect form of the gods' punishment army won't cost the witches' lives, why did Alice want to overthrow the remaining union? When Phyllis asked this question, a rare bitterness appeared on her face. Won't cost the witches' lives? No. Your Majesty, it's not as simple as you think. The first body I used was from a scourge who failed to transfer. Do you know how long it took me to master that body? 10 years? Roland pondered. This was also the time it usually took to train a knight. Nearly 50 years. She shook her head and said, when I became familiar with how to control a body that didn't belong to me, the original body of the gods' punishment army had already aged. The witches present could not help but gasp. The magic power fused into the blood destroys most of the senses, including touch, taste, and smell. Therefore, the gods' punishment army won't feel pain or fear because of injuries. But for us, it's equivalent to subverting the memory of the previous movements. We need to learn how to walk, open our mouth, and clench our fists. At first, we can't even stand up, and we don't know how much strength we should use to hold a cup. If we want our brains to remember these movements, it will take decades of continuous training every day. If we add weapons and fighting skills, it will take at least more than 100 years. Phyllis paused and said, in this case, you know what should happen. Roland frowned and was silent for a while before he said, Alice needs a lot of empty bodies. Yes, once a witch doesn't die, a scourge who has lived for hundreds of years will be much stronger than a newly transformed warrior in any way. In order to continue the strength accumulated by this experience, more bodies must be created for the soul to continue. Even if the new bodies also need time to adapt, the time can be shortened to a few years compared to mastering from the beginning. Chapter 709. It does sound like it, Roland thought. Ashes once said that the difference between the gods' punishment army and the extraordinaries was not in strength and reaction, but in wisdom. If a gods' punishment army had the wisdom of a witch and had an uninterrupted life, the accumulated battle experience of hundreds of years would be so rich that such a soldier would be even more powerful than the extraordinaries. If he had fought against the complete version of the gods' punishment army in Coldwind Ridge, the result would probably have been reversed. As long as the church divided the army into many small teams, sneaked into the hinterland of Grey Castle, and harassed and fought everywhere, he would definitely be caught off guard. In this way, the long adaptation time was not the key point. As long as the souls could be transferred continuously, it was inevitable to keep the powerful veterans. The only problem was, how many scourge could Alice accumulate before the bloody moon? Powerful bodies also had higher tolerance than ordinary people. They would age for about 100 years, and if they participated in the transformation ceremony at the age of 20, they could last about 70 or 80 years. Even if the failure rate of transformation and soul transfer was not taken into account, a witch could only create 2 bodies, which directly limited the number of people in the army. If they wanted to create a god's punishment army of thousands of people, the number of witches consumed during the 400 years of inheritance would probably be extremely terrible. After he asked this question, Phyllis bit her lip and answered, all of them. Roland was stunned, and for a moment he doubted that he had heard wrong. What? Except for the transcendence, she plans to transform all the witches into the gods' punishment army to resist the final doomsday, she repeated. Wait, how can it be done? If we want to suppress the senior demons, we must be well-trained scourge. But if we want to get such warriors, shouldn't we reserve enough bodies to transfer the souls? Yes, but there is another way to preserve the souls, which is to transfer them into other containers. Other containers? We call it dormancy. Phyllis's words made Roland shudder. During this period, the dormant ones don't need to consume any energy, and they lose all senses until they are awakened. Otherwise, how do you think we survive the most difficult early stage? After breaking off with Starfall City, we didn't have any usable God's punishment army bodies. We only survived by hibernation. Of course, there are some exceptions, such as Lady Pasha. What happened to her? You'll understand when you see her. Phyllis did not go into details. In short, Lady Alice planned to train Scourge with complete skills over a period of 100 years, and then let the soul go dormant to save the consumption of the body. In this way, Starfall City will have the ability to continuously transform the gods' punishment army. When the bloody moon comes, all the souls will be awakened at once, so that the number of Scourge will greatly exceed the limit that the witches can bear. This meant that every witch alive on the eve of the final battle would become a material for the transformation. Vendi, Sylvie, and Leaf all showed pity on their faces. Although they couldn't see Nightingale's expression, Roland knew that she must be very gloomy at the moment. What about Alice herself? Does she intend to take part in the soul transfer? No, Phyllis sighed. I heard this from Lady Pasha later. The Queen of Starfall City and her followers never wanted to prolong their lives from the beginning. They planned to devote the rest of their lives to the recasting of the new order to ensure that the gods' punishment army plan would not deviate from the predetermined track. Only when she is a transcendent can she have the strength and prestige to lead the Union. Only that flame-like red hair symbolizes the inextinguishable will of Starfall City. Speaking of this, a very complicated light appeared in her eyes, which contained fear, regret, and respect. Roland could vaguely understand her thoughts. Obviously, they had different intentions, but he was still shocked by her spirit. In order to defeat the demons and let the witches continue, the Queen of Starfall City was still able to move forward without hesitation, no matter how great the price was. Such a person was still worthy of respect, even if she was an opponent. The incomplete historical record was finally filled in. Perhaps because the complete version of the gods' punishment army was too cruel, when something in the ruins was discovered, the gods' punishment army plan was no longer the only feasible plan to fight against the demons, and the split became inevitable. After the split, the Union suffered a great loss, and the witches of Starfall City evolved into a church. After Alice's death, they gradually deviated from the original intention of the Queen. Are the containers, the soul transfer, and the chosen one all related to the things found in the ruins? Roland asked. Phyllis adjusted her emotions and replied, You can say so. So you can't reveal it now? Only Lady Pasha can make this decision. How can the chosen one defeat the demons? Roland raised his eyebrows. I can't reach an agreement with you without knowing anything. I'm not sure about this either. The person in charge of the research instrument is Celine, Phyllis said slowly. We can find the chosen one first, and then we can talk about the next thing. It won't do any harm to the witches of Neverwinter if we only choose the chosen one. Besides, Tequila will never harm their own kind to fight against the demons. Otherwise, we wouldn't have followed Lady Natalia to the end. How do we do it? It's very simple. We just need to let each member of the Union use their ability once. Phyllis raised the ring in her hand. Through it, I can see the witches with the talent of the chosen one. Nightingale had briefly described to him how the magic stone could reflect a strange beam of light. Roland thought for a while and asked, After we find the chosen one, will Pasha come to Neverwinter immediately? Lady Pasha can't leave the underground maze, but she'll use some magic means to talk to you directly, Phyllis replied. Phyllis replied, When this 5-colored magic stone is broken, She will be able to sense my location in an instant. So I can only call her after I find the chosen one. I see. Roland finally nodded and said, "You'll see all the witches of Neverwinter in the castle garden in the afternoon." Phyllis's expression obviously softened after she got Roland's approval. She put her hand on her chest again, bowed her head and said, "Thank you for your promise. After we defeat the demons, your name will be sung together with tequila." Chapter 710. For the first time, Phyllis felt that waiting was unbearable. She had thought that after 400 years of training, time had become the least important thing to her. She did not expect that just one morning would make her feel restless. If Han Lin was right, finding the chosen one would mean the end of the battle of divine will. The instrument of divine retribution could destroy all the demons, and her mission would be over. Without the bodies made by the church, most of the survivors would gradually fall into a deep sleep, and this time, they would probably never be awakened again. Or they would merge their souls with Lady Eleanor and contribute their last bit of energy. Thinking of this, Phyllis felt an indescribable complex feeling in her heart. In addition to the long-awaited release, she also felt a trace of reluctance. Being imprisoned in an empty shell, even if she could continue living, would be a kind of torture. After the war, she would be able to welcome true peace. But when she thought of closing her eyes forever and never being able to see the world of tequila again, she felt reluctant to part with it. Two conflicting emotions attacked her one after another until the afternoon arrived. "Are you ready?" Vendi appeared in the castle hall. "Anytime." Phyllis immediately stood up. "Come with me." Under Vendi's guidance, she passed through a long corridor made of olive trees in the backyard and came to a narrow open space. Surrounded by fences and dense vines, she could only see a small part of the sky above her head and the corridor from which she came. If she wanted to leave, she had to go back the way she came. Phyllis instantly understood the intention of the other witches. The witches under observation would appear at the end of the corridor one by one. This distance would not affect the observation and also ensure the safety of the Union members. If there was any abnormal movement, this corridor would definitely be a gap that she could not cross. Phyllis did not feel disgusted. Instead, she thought more highly of the king. At least he did not treat witches as dispensable accessories. Before he completely gained the trust of the king, his way of doing things was impeccable. So far, in her mind, the witch union had risen to the level of the holy city. Witch organizations that only had scale and means but were suppressed by the secular world were not able to make enough of an impact. Now, with their share in the king's heart, the union was vaguely similar to the union. Not long after Vendi left, the first witch soon appeared in her field of vision. It was Agatha. When the youngest descendant of the tequila age summoned a piece of translucent light blue ice crystal, Phyllis had finished her observation. The beam of light was similar to that of Maggie. It was not the chosen one she was looking for. After indicating that the test was completed, Agatha did not leave the corridor but walked straight towards her. "My lord." Phyllis was slightly surprised. "I used to be a member of the Quest Society, and I'm very interested in magic stones. You wouldn't mind me watching, would you?" "Of course not." Phyllis first shook her head, then respectfully saluted her as a senior witch. "By the way, I haven't thanked you for your help. If it weren't for your words, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to determine the chosen one so quickly." "That's your choice," Agatha said, waving her hand. "Keep watching." Next, the witches displayed their abilities one by one at the end of the corridor. She placed the ring between the two of them. In addition to observing the intensity of the beam of light, Agatha would also record the results. During this period, Phyllis also discovered quite a number of dazzling orange lights. For example, a witch named Soroya had a beam of light that was wider than her shoulders, which was even better than Anna's and Nightingale's. As for another witch, Evelyn, the intensity of her beam of light was astonishing, almost twice that of Anna's. Other than that, Echo and Summer also had stronger orange lights, which had reached the same width as their bodies. Among the members of the Alliance, The most eye-catching one was Leaf. When she activated her magic, Phyllis instantly thought that she was looking at Lady Eleanor. Countless orange beams of light as thick as fingers rose from the surroundings and soared into the sky, as if they were fences connecting heaven and earth. These beams of light came from every plant in the garden, resonating with the magic power of the leaves, as if each and every one of them was alive. The beam of light above Leaf's head was close to the edge of the five-colored magic stone, and it was not inferior to Lady Eleanor's. The moment the beam of light bloomed, Phyllis felt her heart almost jump out of her chest. She almost thought that Leaf was the chosen one that the tequila survivors prayed for. However, after forcibly suppressing her racing heart, she found that the beam of light was still a distance away from the edge of the magic stone. The orange light reflected by the key would not change according to the distance of the target. As long as it was in front of her eyes, the scene she saw was the true performance of the key. Although the entire back garden was filled with beams of light, they were not the light wall that she saw. Although the dense beams of light were magnificent, they were never connected. She was also not the chosen one. After letting out a long breath, Phyllis put down the ring and quietly waited for the next witch to appear. However, until the end, she could not see the thick light wall again. This is everyone in the witch union. Agatha closed the notebook. Is Leaf the chosen one you are looking for? The chosen one is not among them. Phyllis was silent for a while before she muttered, although her beam of light is amazing, it is still far from the orange light that I observed at night. Her heart, which had calmed down with great difficulty, once again became anxious. Why did this happen? Could it be that Roland Wimbledon hid the chosen one? Or could it be that not all the members of the witch union were present? Was he unwilling to unite with the tequila to fight against the demons? Or was he worried about the witch empire that had once ruled the entire continent? Thoughts flashed through her mind, but she rejected them one by one. No, it did not make sense. The other party did not have the five-colored magic stone, so it was impossible for him to hide the chosen one in advance. Moreover, Lady Agatha would never collude with mortals to deceive her when it came to fighting against the demons. At such a time, she had to remain calm. Unwarranted accusations and suspicions would only make things worse. At night, Agatha frowned. Witches usually don't practice their abilities in their rooms. Besides, you should have lived in the Foreign Affairs building at that time. Can the magic stone observe from such a long distance? I did see the chosen one's beam of light. Not only was the width beyond imagination, but the distance was also beyond the range that the magic stone could sense. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a miracle. Phyllis said as calmly as possible, I swear in the name of tequila. I see. Agatha nodded. Then give me the ring. Lady, you mean? She was slightly stunned. Chapter 7:11. The night passed quickly, and Phyllis hardly slept at all. She locked herself in her room and silently waited for the results to be revealed. Although she remained calm on the surface, she had countless speculations about the reason for the disappearance of the chosen one. She even speculated that Roland had imprisoned the witches as playthings and had concealed the truth from the witch union. Therefore, when Vendy and Agatha came to the Foreign Affairs building early the next morning, Phyllis showed a rare trace of tiredness. The mental exhaustion was a great burden on the soul. She knew that her control over her body was declining, and even her hands and feet were not as flexible as before. But she also knew that she could not close her eyes until she heard the result. Cutting off consciousness could only temporarily get rid of the shackles of the body, but the soul was still awake. Unless it was transferred to a magic container, shrinking into the consciousness would only be deceiving herself. Phyllis even faintly missed the long sleep. The result is, we found the beam of light you mentioned. Phyllis did not expect Agatha's first words to shatter the burden on her heart. She blinked, afraid that she had misheard, and asked again in a low voice, like a wall of light? Yes, like a wall of light, it does exist in the castle, Vendy said. But we can't be sure that he's the chosen one you mentioned. In other words, she didn't mishear? They found the owner of the orange light. No. It can't be wrong. Phyllis felt a voice in her heart cheering. Praise the gods. Praise the holy city of Tequila. If he can emit such a beam of light, then he must be the chosen one we're looking for. Is he a senior witch? What's his name? However, Phyllis did not answer immediately. Instead, she showed a strange look, as if she wanted to laugh, but also felt quite helpless. Well, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. Vendi covered the corner of her mouth and coughed softly. Could it be that there's something wrong with the 5-colored stone? Agatha returned the ring to her. I think you'd better contact Pasha as soon as possible. Something wrong? What the hell happened? Wait. Phyllis suddenly felt a bolt of lightning flashing through her mind. What did Vendi say before? But we can't be sure that he is the chosen one you mentioned. Phyllis opened her mouth wide in disbelief. Is that orange light from? It came from His Majesty Roland Wimbledon. Agatha spread out her hands. I wasn't the only one who came. Nightingale, Anna, Vendi, all the witches living on the 2nd floor of the castle came to check it out. I've also tested him with the stone of balancing. As usual, he doesn't have any mana on him. You said that the weapon can deal with demons. Does the operator have to be a witch? Vendi could not help but chuckle. Although there were still hundreds of witches on Sleeping Island, and Leaf's aptitude was not far from the requirements of the Chosen One, Phyllis had a vague premonition in her heart that this little gap was like a chasm. Perhaps their choice was not much better than Starfall City's. Although I don't quite understand what you think of the Chosen One, but even without such a person, haven't we fought with the demons for hundreds of years? I thought that witches who could survive the disaster could calmly face any difficulties, Agatha said slowly. But we failed twice in a row and were forced to retreat from the entire Land of Dawn to a corner of the barbarian land. If we lose again, then just defeat the demons, Agatha interrupted her. I don't know what you found in the ruins of the labyrinth that made you pin all your hopes on it, but I think if it's really effective, it shouldn't be a part of the ruins. In the past 400 years, the common people outside haven't been stagnant. There's more than one way to defeat the demons. As Roland said, as long as we use the hidden power in the world, common people can also defeat them. Phyllis looked at her with a complicated expression. She instinctively wanted to question Agatha, but she could not say a word under Agatha's burning gaze. By the way, he also said that there's more than one key to God. He also has one in his hand. Maybe you should take a look before contacting the Tequila Witches. His key? Key? Phyllis was startled. Chapter 712. Recalling what had happened in the morning, Roland felt that it was quite unbelievable. He's just an ordinary transmigrator. How did he become the chosen one? At this time, should he recite a poem to express his astonishment? When he woke up early in the morning, when Agatha reported the results of her observation to him, he thought he had heard it wrong. However, under the witness of so many witches, he had no choice but to accept it. At the same time, Roland knew that the result would definitely be beyond the expectations of the tequila survivors. In order to strengthen the credibility of the communication, he simply asked them to visit his nap at noon. Roland did not know whether it was because he had become more mentally strong after becoming the king, or because he was simply lazy. He picked up a book of advanced mathematics and read it on the office bench. Not long after, he actually fell asleep. When he was woken up, the first thing he saw was the back of Nightingale, who was on guard with her gun drawn, and Phyllis, who had fainted. However, Roland did not think that the so-called chosen one was the one chosen by God. It was just that the tequila survivors had placed too much hope on the thing they had discovered, so they regarded the witch who could activate it as a savior. There was no doubt that the thing in the ruins must be extraordinary, since it could make the 3 chiefs of the Union turn against each other in an extremely dangerous time. However, it was worth considering that it had the power comparable to that of God and could destroy the demons. After all, if it was really a creation of God, how could the person who made it disappear in the underground maze without a sound? Of course, If he wanted to know more about the inside story, he had to further communicate with the survivors. In addition, the fact that the dream world could be observed also proved his conjecture. This dream world was indeed not completely constructed by his consciousness. The rich details far exceeded the ability of the brain. It was true that he had provided a lot of materials, but it was someone else who had combined them into a complete form. Before, he had speculated that witches were the terminals of magic power transformation. Now it seemed that there was still a barrier between the terminals and magic power. It was this barrier that gave magic power wonderful changes. It was like a black box with unknown principles. As long as the witches issued an order, the black box would be able to give the result. In other words, the process of realizing a witch's ability was no different from the dream world. The only difference was that he did not have the magic to materialize the dream world. Roland couldn't help but think of the relationship between wizards and the weave. The former used hand gestures, incantations, and casting materials to connect with the weave to obtain the power they needed. If the checkpoints were seen as the weave, there would be some similarities. After defeating Zero, he unexpectedly obtained the ability to connect to the checkpoint, but that was all. The complexity of the command was most likely related to the difficulty of materialization, not the strength or use of the ability. On the contrary, the closer an ability was to the essence of magic power, the easier the transformation should be. For example, directly transforming magic power into light and heat was certainly much easier than creating matter, but the power would definitely be earth-shattering. It was also one of the reasons why Roland was so interested in the relic. The pillar of light that the five-colored stone presented seemed to be a special method of instruction transmission, replacing witches with artificial objects and trying to forge instructions. The research on magic power to such an extent was obviously beyond the level of the Union. Putting aside the titles of the Chosen One and the Instrument of Divine Retribution, it might mean the germination of a new technology. For this reason alone, he had to deal with the Tequila Witches. Considering that the Chosen One turned out to be a common person, might bring a heavy blow to the witches and even frustrate their confidence in fighting against the demons, Roland decided to let Phyllis have a look at the power of the new era before going deeper into the negotiation. In order to achieve a better effect of persuasion, he summoned Iron Axe into his office. "How's the situation of the demonic beasts recently?" "Your Majesty, it's just scattered attacks. The patrol team on the city wall can solve them," the Sand Nation replied after making a standard military salute. "Very good. I plan to hold a cannon exercise in the city wall area. It needs to be grand and powerful, but also to reduce waste as much as possible." The commander-in-chief of the First Army pondered for a while and said, "You mean fake?" Roland could not help but laugh. It seemed that Iron Axe's understanding of gunpowder was becoming more and more accurate. To be precise, it's half true and half false. When demonstrating accurate shooting, load live ammunition. When demonstrating fire coverage, use embedded black powder. Do you understand what I mean? "Yes, Your Majesty," Iron Axe immediately nodded. Blank ammunition was commonly used in maneuvers. Since it was used to bluff people, there was naturally no need to pour the precious howitzers out like water. Embedded explosives that were detonated by wires could also achieve an earth-shattering effect, or even better. Roland roughly explained the plan in his mind. "I hope the final explosion will be enough to attract attention. For this, you can prepare more black powder. Your Majesty, this may affect the operation of the artillery battalion." He shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter. In fact, I plan to gradually eliminate black powder weapons, such as the 12-pound field artillery, which is no longer suitable for future battles. Its heavy body, slow firing speed, and low power of solid bullets all restricted its further application. The battle under Coldwind Ridge had fully demonstrated that the lethality of field artillery was very limited, especially in the face of scattered and fast-moving enemies. Most of the God's Punishment Army fell under the machine guns and longsong cannons, and only about 100 people were hit by iron balls. In addition, it was difficult to transport, difficult to cooperate with the infantry in attacking, and difficult to carry out urban operations, so its use became increasingly limited. The revolving rifles could still be used for a while, but the gunpowder consumption of bullets was much smaller, so even if half of the stock was consumed, it would not be affected. With the help of the dream world, Roland's new chemical reform plan was already in preparation. The steady increase in the output of double-base gunpowder gave him the capital to eliminate black powder weapons. "You've designed a new alternative weapon?" Iron Axe's eyes suddenly lit up. Roland smiled as he took out a piece of paper from the drawer and spread it out on the table. "It's a kind of curved fire that can be carried by several people separately. It's powerful, simple in structure, and effortless in operation. What do you think?" Iron Axe bent down to look at the drawing for a while and said, Sorry, Your Majesty, I can only see its appearance. It looks like an iron pipe. With such a thin wall, can it really fire artillery shells?" Of course, the key lies in the special shells, but compared with the 152mm howitzer, it's still much simpler to make. Does the new weapon have a name? Chapter 7:13. He had come up with many plans for the development of the new artillery. As the saying goes, there is no such thing as the best weapon, only the most suitable weapon. After considering the opponent, battlefield environment, production level, and many other aspects, he finally chose the cheap mortar that could replace the outdated front-mounted field artillery. Its shooting range could effectively cover an area of 200 to 3,000 meters, filling the gap between heavy machine guns and longsong cannons, and at the same time, enhancing the attack effect within a short range. Due to the existence of the impassable defense line, the most important role of the mortar was to make up for loopholes. It could be carried by soldiers across the mountains and set up artillery positions at any point in the mountains. It was light and easy to carry, which was unmatched by other weapons. In addition, the height difference between the foothills was very common, so the curved fire could exert its maximum power in this kind of terrain. And the production level of Neverwinter was the reason why Roland finally made this decision. The structure of the mortar was much simpler than that of the howitzer. The shell could be made of cast iron, and the barrel did not have rifling, so the production requirement was lower, and it would not affect the production capacity of the 152mm artillery. If he developed a small-caliber field artillery, the recoil, the rifling barrel, and the corresponding fuse shell would conflict with the longsong cannons that he was trying to independently produce. Under the circumstances that the new machine tools and processing technology had not passed the test, even if the attempt failed, he could still use Anna as an emergency measure to supplement the key parts of the longsong cannon with blackfire, so the impact would not be too great. But with the addition of the new field artillery, the production pressure would inevitably increase, and the First Army might fall into the predicament of having no artillery to use. In addition, Roland also considered developing grenades for individual soldiers as supplementary weapons, and even made a few samples for testing. But the performance of the test products filled with black gunpowder was really unbearable. They might be useful in the urban battle to recover Greycastle, but they were not powerful enough to deal with demonic beasts and demons. Considering that the chemical production capacity of Neverwinter was not enough to distribute grenades filled with double-base gunpowder to every soldier, he had to give up this idea. At night, Roland went down to the second floor and gently knocked on the door of Anna's bedroom. With a squeak, Anna poked her head out from behind the door. She looked surprised to see him. But this surprise only lasted for less than a second, and soon a faint blush appeared on her bright face. Walking into the room, Roland picked her up from behind, walked to the bed quietly, and lay down on the soft bed with her. "Why did you?" Anna's blue eyes sparkled like jewels in the night sky. Usually, she would take the initiative to look for Roland 2 or 3 times a week. According to her, this frequency would not affect her daily work. Of course, she would not refuse Roland's request. It was just that ever since he confessed his feelings for Nightingale, he always felt very guilty. It had been a long time since he took the initiative to ask something from Anna. Moreover, it was the first time that he personally came to Anna's room. Although she was the only witch who lived alone, Leaf and Scroll slept next door. In consideration of the soundproofing problem, the two would always have in-depth exchanges upstairs. With such a situation, it was no wonder that Anna was surprised. "I want to talk to you about the dream world," Roland whispered in her ear. "I don't have time in the afternoon. You also want to know more about the life I experienced in the past." "You dreamed of another world?" Anna quickly guessed the truth. "Yes, it's like a world built with my memory as the blueprint, but it has many special features, such as the force of nature, which is very similar to magic power." The night he confessed to Anna, Roland found that she was not completely ignorant about Nightingale, but from beginning to end, she had been waiting for him to take the initiative to tell her. From then on, he understood Anna's approach. Although she would not hide her emotions or thoughts in front of him, there were some things that she would still wait patiently for. The only reason was that she did not want to embarrass him. This made Roland faintly worried. He did not know where the line was. If one or two incidents continued to accumulate, would she gradually change to the direction of hiding her thoughts and waiting in silence? Compared to becoming taciturn because she was afraid of being hurt, he preferred Anna, who now trusted him wholeheartedly and spoke her mind without mincing words. Therefore, Roland did not intend to hide anything from her. Even if she did not take the initiative to ask, he would still pour out his heart. Apparently, Anna knew what he was thinking. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and said, "I see. Then let's talk about your residence. In the dream, did you also live in the castle?" "No, it's a tube-shaped building. It's like an apartment shared by many people. Everyone has a medium-sized suite, and there's someone living in my room that you'll never guess." "Well, could it be Zero?" Why? "It's very simple. You said you had such a dream after you defeated Zero in the soul battlefield. So the birth of the dream is related to you and the other half to her, right? It's not strange for two people who created the world to appear in the same place. But did she attack you again after that?" "No, she lost all the memories before her awakening and became a 10-year-old kid, the kind of girl who has no hair on her mouth but thinks she knows everything. She's in her teens and they're living together. Could she be your family?" "Well, Zero was fostered by her parents and brought to me. She can be considered as a tenant." "Really? Then you have to take good care of her." "Why? That's a dream." "But didn't you say it's no different from reality? In that case, why do you need to distinguish whether it's a dream or not?" Roland was once again amazed by Anna's unusual way of thinking. The conversation seemed to be going off track. However, when he saw Anna's spirited eyes and excited tone, he did not care about these details. From the apartment of souls to the memory fragments, and then from the force of nature to the martialist association, Anna's voice gradually became lower. She lay on Roland's arm, her chest slightly rising and falling, and her breathing became steadier. Although she had fallen asleep, her other hand was firmly wrapped around his waist as if she did not want him to leave. In this way, he could not return to the bedroom without disturbing her. "Well, I'll spend the night here and hope that no one will notice me walking out of the bedroom on the second floor tomorrow morning." Chapter 714. The next day, as usual, Roland got up very late. When he woke up, Anna was already gone, leaving only a few fine flaxen hairs on his arm and a faint, reassuring fragrance. There was a breakfast on the bedside table, which was obviously brought up by her from the kitchen. There was also a note on the plate with a short line of words, "I know you like to sleep late, so I won't eat with you." She is still able to keep working and get up on time at this time. I can only say that she is indeed a serious person. Roland shook his head helplessly and got out of bed. Even if the castle was fully heated, it was still a difficult process to leave the comfortable bed in winter. The wooden basin that Anna used to wash her face was still warm, so he directly washed his face with the remaining warm water in the basin. He then picked up the breakfast and quietly walked to the office on the third floor. When he opened the office door, Barav and Edith were already waiting for him inside. Nightingale stayed in her usual place, her exclusive recliner by the fireplace. She was reading the witch's comic books and chewing dried fish, looking as comfortable as usual. "So early today?" Roland pretended to be nonchalant and casually greeted. "What's the matter? Sit down and talk." Ahem. The director of City Hall cleared his throat, as if he had long been accustomed to this. "Your Majesty, the logistical preparations for the attack on the southernmost region have been completed. In addition, the recruitment of reserve soldiers is also going well. By next spring, the First Army is expected to have a total of 7,000 soldiers, which is already unrivaled in Grey Castle." "It's only in Grey Castle," Edith suddenly interrupted. "Your Majesty is not going to deal with those stupid knight and nobles." Roland smiled and opened the report on the table. "Indeed. If we want to fight against the demons, we can't stop the expansion of the population and the construction of the army. The more soldiers the First Army recruits, the better it will be without affecting production." Barav was slightly dissatisfied, but since the king had spoken, he could only agree and glare at the Pearl of the Northern region. According to common sense, the First Army should be responsible for the recruitment of soldiers and logistics. However, most of the generals under Iron Axe were from humble backgrounds. They might be able to lead troops into battle, but they knew nothing about finance and administration. Therefore, when it came to money and food, Barav still had to cooperate with them. In the future, when the scale of the First Army was further expanded, this kind of personnel allocation would obviously be somewhat difficult to continue. The simple management framework that had been established in a flash could no longer meet the needs of future development. Perhaps it was time to make a new round of reform of the military system. Roland turned his attention back to the report. According to Iron Axe's plan, there were about 1,000 soldiers attacking the southernmost region. Neverwinter would dispatch 500 veterans to join the new recruits stationed at Fallen Dragon Ridge, and then they would march toward Iron Sand City along the Silver Stream Oasis. As long as they brought along two 152mm long-song cannons, it should not be a problem for such a force to conquer Iron Sand City. However, the key to conquering the Sand Nation was not to conquer the city, but to win the Holy Duel. Therefore, the role of the First Army was more to escort and maintain order. The City Hall could handle the logistics of the expedition of 1,000 soldiers easily, and the details involved were getting more and more complete. In the past, the situation where he had to personally instruct the soldiers on everything was gone, and some of the details were even beyond his expectations. It was obvious that this was the experience he had accumulated after several actual battles. "Very well, let's do that." Roland closed the report and looked at the Pearl of the Northern region. "Do you have anything else to say?" If it was just to report on logistics, Edith would not have come with Barav. She had never been the kind of person who liked to snatch credit. "Yes, Your Majesty." Edith nodded and said, "I heard from Iron Axe that you plan to hold an artillery drill?" "Yes, that's right. I was thinking, can the people of Neverwinter also participate in the drill?" Her second sentence made Roland's eyes light up. If your people can witness such a spectacular scene, it should greatly increase their enthusiasm to join the army, and in the future, they will certainly be full of confidence in fighting the demons. How can we let people participate in this kind of thing? Barav frowned and said, "It's not like you haven't seen the scene of explosives exploding. What if they are scared out of their wits and think it's a divine punishment?" "That's also a divine punishment under His Majesty's control. As long as we do a good job of propaganda, this kind of shock can be minimized," Edith said bluntly. "Even a lord of a fief will occasionally hold an open military drill to determine which knight is more brave and skillful in fighting. In addition to finding some entertainment for the nobles, it also has the intention of declaring military force to the people. The artillery is not like the wooden spear in the hands of the knight. We can divide the viewing area on the city wall and send policemen to maintain order. Considering the limited number of seats, it's a more reasonable choice to enter the drill with tickets. The ticket price of 2 silver royals can not only prevent people from swarming in, but also increase an extra income." Edith spoke with fervor and assurance. It was obvious that she had considered this proposal comprehensively. In addition, the spectators should also be screened. The age of the ticket buyers should be between 15 and 30 years old. They will also be the main force of various industries in Neverwinter in the future. Enhancing their faith will help to fight against the battle of divine will. And some key departments, such as the personnel of the City Hall, I think we should force them to participate. Roland was quite tempted. Isn't this a military parade? It can make a live-fire military parade and a performance together to earn money while also being politically sensitive. Perhaps the talents that the army reform lacks are right in front of us. Thinking of this, he nodded and said, "Sounds good. Let's do as you say." Neverwinter really needs some exciting news. When May passed through the square with a basket full of bird beak mushrooms, she found that the square was full of people. Even though it was snowing, it did not prevent people from gathering around the notice board. She followed curiously and saw the propagandist shouting in the crowd, "His Majesty the King will hold an open artillery drill in 3 days. It will be held in the west of the city wall, at the front line against the demonic beasts. Do you want to see how the First Army's latest sophisticated weapon blows the demonic beasts into pieces? Do you want to feel the shock of the wrath of God? Go to the City Hall to sign up now. As long as you meet the requirements, with your ID card and 2 silver royals, you can get the opportunity to see the heroic fighting posture of the people of the Western region up close. The seats are limited and the opportunity is rare. If you miss it, you will have to wait until next winter." Is this another new idea of His Majesty? Even the propaganda is so unique. May curled her lips and thought, Carter will probably be very interested in this. However, she did not need to go to the City Hall to buy tickets. As the Chief Knight, he would definitely be able to attend this drill with His Majesty. Chapter 7:15. Not long after leaving the square, May heard a series of subtle footsteps behind her. "Mrs. Lannis, please wait for me, Mrs. Lannis." It took her a while to realize that someone was calling her. She turned around and saw a girl about 17 or 18 years old running towards her. The girl had 2 braids and her face was red from the cold wind. However, her cotton-padded clothes and leather boots were brand new, and the material and workmanship were very solid. 2 years ago, she would have thought that she was a lady from a rich family. But now, there were more and more people who could afford new clothes, and one could no longer be judged by appearance alone. The girl ran to her side, took a few breaths, and handed one of the 2 salted fish in her hand to her. "Mrs. Lannis, this is my thank you gift. Please accept it." May could not help but be surprised. "Thank you gift? I've wanted to meet you for a long time. If my father saw your play, he would definitely be very pleased. But I don't know you, and I don't know your father. Can you tell me what happened from the beginning?" It took the star of the Western region half an hour to roughly understand the whole story. The girl's name was Jasmine. After walking out of the convenience market, Jasmine happened to recognize her from behind. Giving her the fish was just a temporary gesture to express her gratitude. Jasmine's father, a soldier of the First Army, was unfortunately killed in the battle with the church, leaving only her and her mother behind. The generous pension from the City Hall and the preferential recruitment policy allowed them to live without worrying about their lives, but the death of her father still made Molly sad for a long time. It was not until the new play, A Hero's Life, was staged that she pulled herself together. In the play, all those who sacrificed their lives to protect their families and the kingdom were given the title of hero by His Majesty. My mother said that he used to be an ordinary hunter. She didn't expect that he would receive such an honor after his death. So, if I have the chance to meet you, she asked me to thank you properly. Jasmine bowed deeply to May. Now everyone calls me the daughter of a hero, which makes me feel that my father actually hasn't left me. If it weren't for the fact that the First Army doesn't recruit women, I would also want to pick up a gun and fight against those enemies with bad intentions. May was silent for a moment before asking softly, "But there is a possibility of sacrifice in battle. Aren't you afraid?" Jasmine first nodded, then shook her head. "In the past, every winter, we would have to move our whole family to Longsong Stronghold. Many people would die on the road and then be thrown into the Redwater River. Every time we heard a splash, it meant that a person had died. In the slums, there were even more deaths. After a heavy snowfall, frozen corpses could be seen everywhere on the streets. At that time, I was so scared that I would be the next one if I closed my eyes. It's precisely because I don't want to return to that state that I need someone to stand up and fight for a new life, she said word by word. It was a line from a play. In that instant, May felt something soft in her heart being touched. She reached out and stroked the girl's hair. Even if I have to give up everything? When the narrator in the play asked this question, May vaguely remembered that the whole square was silent. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the hero to answer. At this moment, Jasmine's answer was as powerful as a hero in a drama. Because it is worth it. I accept your gift of thanks. Take care, Mrs. Lannis. The girl waved her hand cheerfully, turned around and ran away to another street. May looked at the heavy salted fish in her hand and recalled the scene when she asked Cajun Fells for advice when she performed at the Grand Theater in the Old King City. What is the best play? To focus the audience's attention firmly on you, to think that you are the person in the play, that they are not watching the play, but your life. To be able to do this is the most outstanding performance. For this reason, she practiced her acting skills hard, pondered the mood and expression of the character, and devoted herself to the story of the play. Every detail had to be impeccable. Her efforts finally paid off. At the age of 25, she became a well-known actress and gained a foothold in the King's City as a native of the Western region. At the peak of her popularity, even the famous plays of the Grand Theater in the King's City could not overshadow her. But now, May's thoughts had changed. Was her performance perfect during the performance of A Hero's Life? Not really. His Majesty's script was written too quickly. It took 2 or 3 weeks to rehearse and 1 week to memorize the lines. Most of the time, the crew made improvements as they performed. For example, when she played the role of the hero's wife, she had problems with missing words and using the wrong expressions. Not to mention that this story was not a love story that she was familiar with. Many things had to be figured out again, so it was not perfect at all. But was the play not well received? Judging from the applause from the audience, A Hero's Life was definitely not much worse than A Prince's Search for Love. When the protagonist said, "Because it is worth it," the audience burst out in response and almost scattered the snow on the impassable mountain range. Maybe this is the best performance, she thought. She would never see such a scene in the Grand Theater in the King's City. The nobles might shed tears or applaud for the characters in the play, but they were always watching her, an outsider's life. But here, the audience saw themselves. Through the play, people saw the future they wanted. Back at her residence, May unexpectedly saw Irene and the light of dawn. May, you've come back just in time. Irene jumped up from her seat and held her shoulders. We've just asked Sir Carter to help us reserve a good seat. You should also come with us when the time comes. But what was wrong with her today? She didn't understand what people were talking about. She rolled her eyes, slapped Irene's hand away, and put the bird beak mushrooms and salted fish into the kitchen. An artillery drill, Irene shouted behind her. I heard it's the largest one since the establishment of the First Army. There's already a long queue in front of the City Hall. Aren't you interested? Not interested. May shrugged. If you have the time, you might as well read the script a few more times. Just think of it as accompanying me, okay? This girl was really clingy, but she couldn't find the energy to scold her. Unlike others, Irene's friendliness came from the bottom of her heart, which she had already experienced in the Long Song Theater. May was going to refuse, but she didn't know why. She slowly swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. Indeed, she didn't like things related to fighting at all, but sometimes fighting was not all bad and unbearable. If she went to have a look, she might be able to experience the real feelings of a soldier, so that she could be more involved in the next performance. Of course, it was definitely not because of Irene's soft pleading. I know. After a moment of hesitation, May sighed. If you insist. Haha, really? That's great. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.